Snow falls gently over a crowded street, while holiday music plays in the background, creating a festive atmosphere for everyone out tonight. Bright ornaments and lights decorate the trees, as the sounds of laughter and joy fill the cold winter air during the celebrations. The little girl beams with pure excitement and shouts that she had the absolute best time ever during her day out in the snow. Our boy Lee Ho-yi walks right past the cheerful family, looking like a dark shadow in his heavy coat amidst all the bright colors. The little girl stops in her tracks and stares up at the massive man walking past her with wide eyes. Ho-yi glances back at them for just a second, his expression unreadable as he continues his solitary trek through the freezing city streets. Out of everyone packed onto this festive sidewalk, Ho-yi realizes with a heavy heart that he is the only person here truly alone. While everyone else is busy celebrating with their loved ones, our boy can't help but feel a deep sense of isolation while heading home alone. Suddenly, his boots come to a halt on the icy pavement when he notices something unusual lying right in his path forward. Ho-yi narrows his eyes and focuses on a cardboard sign resting on the ground, partially covered by the light dusting of fresh snow. The messy handwriting on the sign tells anyone passing by to share their secret wish with Santa if they want it to happen. Feeling a rare spark of compassion, Ho-yi kneels down next to a man dressed in a tattered Santa suit who is begging for help. Our protagonist reaches into his wallet and pulls out some cash, decided to share a bit of his own luck with the poor guy. He holds out a small snack along with the money, showing a side of himself that is far kinder than his cold exterior suggests. The beggar looks up in surprise as Ho-yi places the food and bills down, calling our boy an incredibly kind person for stopping. The strange man suddenly lunges forward and grabs Ho-yi's wrist with a grip that feels like cold iron while staring at him with a terrifying intensity. Even as Ho-yi tries to retreat, the man refuses to let go and keeps dragging him closer through the falling snow. Our guy is absolutely stunned and incredibly annoyed that this random Santa won't stop gripping his hands in the middle of the street. The man squeezes even tighter, making it very clear that he has no intention of letting his benefactor walk away just yet. The beggar shouts that he has come to grant a wish to a kind soul, while Ho-yi panics because he has never been overpowered before. This weird Santa starts begging Ho-yi for a wish, claiming he cannot return to his village until he hears what our boy wants most. They remain locked together in the middle of the sidewalk, a scene so strange that other people probably think it is just a performance. When Ho-yi looks into the man's eyes, he sees a terrifying reflection of himself that makes his blood run cold in his veins. The man dismisses any superficial thoughts and demands that Ho-yi reveal a truly heartfelt wish that comes from the depths of his soul. Ho-yi goes quiet as a specific memory surfaces, his eyes losing their sharp edge as he thinks about the one thing he lacks. He remembers the crushing silence of a funeral home where he sat alone, wishing for a family that would never leave his side. A faint and bittersweet smile crosses Ho-yi's face as he finally admits to himself how much he craves a real sense of belonging. He stops fighting the man's grip for a moment, allowing the heavy silence of the snowy night to settle between the two of them. The beggar leans in and claims he can actually smell the scent of Ho-yi's earnest and deep desire for a permanent family bond. A wide and unsettling grin spreads across the man's face as he prepares to make good on his promise to the kind stranger. The strange man's eyes glow with a demonic red light as he promises to find a wife with a heart as pure as snow to fulfill the wish. The terrifying entity continues his dark proclamation, vowing to grant Ho-yi a beautiful daughter who will respect and always follow her father. This bizarre contract is sealed in the darkness of the winter night, promising a future that sounds more like a curse than a gift. Ho-yi is absolutely horrified by the man's sudden transformation and tries his best to scramble away from the kneeling monster in red. Ho-yi finally breaks free and runs for his life while calling the creepy Santa a crazy bastard who has completely lost his mind. The man screams that the whole village is rooting for him, while Ho-yi keeps sprinting away to escape the sheer insanity of the situation. Everything starts to blur together into a mess of vertical static as reality itself begins to shift and warp around him. The scene suddenly snaps back to the mundane world with a subway train screaming past at high speeds through the tunnel. Ho-yi looks down at his wrist, where a dark bruise is already starting to form from the struggle he just escaped. Sitting alone on the subway bench across from the sleeping child, Ho-yi stares blankly at the floor while wondering if his bizarre encounter with Santa was actually real. Even after everything that happened, he wonders why he felt the need to share his deepest wish with a complete stranger. He stares at a happy family on a subway ad, a painful reminder of the life and connections he has always lacked. Exhaustion finally wins the battle, and he lets his eyes slip shut, hoping for just one single moment of quiet and rest. Darkness swallows everything as his consciousness drifts into a deep and hazy void, where time and space seem to lose all meaning. A sudden and jarring sensation ripples through his mind, as if the entire world is being violently shaken back into existence. Ho-yi groans as he wakes up with a splitting headache, realizing he is no longer on the subway and is definitely missing his clothes. He snaps his eyes open, and his heart nearly stops when he sees the impossible reality waiting for him on the other side. He finds himself trapped in a wooden horse-drawn carriage, rolling through a strange medieval town he has never seen before. Shivering and half-naked, he realizes there is a heavy iron shackle around his ankle that is keeping him anchored to the floorboards. He looks around the cage and spots a man with a wild beard who looks like he has been through absolute hell lately. Another man nearby is barely clinging to life, looking pale and broken while flies circle his head in the sweltering afternoon heat. The entire cage is filled with broken people who have clearly lost all hope of ever seeing their homes or their families again. Ho-yi stares at the bars, the cold realization of his current situation weighing heavier on him than the iron chains around his leg. Cold sweat beads on his forehead as he tries to make sense of how he ended up in this medieval and terrifying nightmare. He watches the armored soldiers patrolling outside, but cannot understand a single word of the foreign tongue they are speaking. Between the medieval architecture and the total lack of familiar faces, it feels like he has been dropped right into a fantasy movie set. His expression hardens as survival instincts start to kick in, replacing the initial shock with a grim and focused sense of determination. He takes a sharp and jagged breath, trying to steady his racing heart while his mind scrambles for a way out. His bare feet are caked in dirt, and every movement of his shackled leg sends a dull metallic clinking sound through the cage. He notices a fellow captive slumped over and motionless, wondering if the poor man has already succumbed to the journey's hardships. Our boy reaches out to check on his fellow prisoner, hoping to find some small spark of life in this miserable place. He turns away after realizing there is nothing he can do, feeling the rough fabric of a new tunic against his skin. Dressed in rough slave clothing, he collapses onto the floor of the moving carriage and stares up in total exhaustion. The words of the man in red echo in his mind, promising to pour every ounce of power into making his wish come true. He wonders if this brutal captivity is actually what that crazy Santa meant when he promised to grant a wish for happiness. Time begins to blur as the horse-drawn cage travels endlessly through thick forests, moving further away from the world he once knew. Sitting in the corner of his cage, the grim reality finally sets in that every person in this transport is officially a slave. He huffs out a breath of stale air, his body aching from the constant movement and his spirit starting to fray. The carriage is a somber sight, filled with silent captives who have all been stripped of their dignity and their basic freedom. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and begins to fiddle with the heavy iron lock, signaling that their journey might finally be ending. The soldiers finally open the cage doors and order the prisoners out, treating them like nothing more than common livestock. Watching his fellow captives walk out with their heads bowed, he realizes just how completely this ordeal has crushed their spirits. But even in this absolute hellhole, a tiny spark of something different begins to flicker deep inside his chest. It is a strange and unexpected sense of hope that he just cannot seem to shake off. He tries to stay positive by telling himself that his decent physical condition might actually give him a fighting chance at survival. For a brief second, he actually looks like he might have a plan forming in that head of his. He is trying his best to stay positive despite the grime and the sweat, looking for any possible advantage. That fake confidence does not last very long, though. The sheer exhaustion of the journey is finally catching up to him, and the light in his eyes is starting to fade into a dull stare. The carriage keeps rattling through the dense forest, moving further away from everything he once knew. It is just an endless blur of trees and the rhythmic sound of iron wheels on the dirt road. The trek continues in total silence as the guards lead the group deeper into a territory that feels completely detached from modern civilization. A sudden, violent jolt sends him crashing into the wooden floorboards as the carriage continues its bumpy path through the wilderness. He is starting to spiral into a dark place now. He wonders if there is even any point to living like this, or if he is just prolonging the inevitable suffering for no reason. Suddenly, a voice from his past life echoes through his mind. Someone is calling him Juan and telling him that no matter how bad the situation gets, he has to live his life to the absolute fullest. A blurred memory of his mother appears, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. It is a warm and distant feeling that feels almost painful to remember in a place as cold as this carriage. Back then, he was just a kid with big eyes and a bright future ahead of him. He had no idea that his life would eventually lead to him being trapped in a wooden box like an animal. He collapses on the floor and cries out for his parents as the crushing weight of loneliness, finally, pushes him toward a breaking point. The dark thoughts are winning the battle inside his head. He asks himself if he can actually endure this kind of life any longer, and the answer feels like a terrifying no. The bizarre promise from his past life returns to haunt him as he remembers a mystical entity swearing to grant his deepest wish. He remembers a strange man in a Santa suit begging him for something in the middle of a snowy street while he looked on in confusion. Pure rage consumes his soul, and he decides that both his old and new lives deserve to burn in hell for what they put him through. He lunges forward with the stolen fork while gripped by a suicidal impulse that feels like the only escape from his current misery. He is fully convinced that dying is the only way to escape the constant agony of his existence. It is a split-second decision born from pure and unadulterated desperation. The sharp tines of the fork press against his own throat, drawing a thin line of blood. He is shaking violently, his resolve starting to waver as he stares into the dark abyss of his own making. A vision of a happy family dinner flashes through his mind and forces him to remember the warmth he lost long ago. He is crying openly now, the fork still held tight against his neck as he hesitates. He is so close to ending everything, lost in a suffocating sea of self-loathing and misery. Just as he is about to press down and end it all, a hand suddenly appears between the iron bars. It is holding a simple loaf of bread that smells fresh and warm in the morning air. He looks up to see a kind woman standing outside his cell with a warm smile that feels like a light in the middle of his darkness. The woman speaks a language he cannot understand, but her gentle tone makes him lower the weapon as he stares at her in complete shock. A small girl peeks out from behind the woman and gazes at him with an innocent curiosity that makes his suicidal thoughts vanish instantly. He drops the fork onto the floor and lets it clatter away as the simple kindness of a mother and child gives him the strength to live. A quiet wooden cabin sits nestled in the woods as the morning sun begins to filter through the trees. Lizzie sits at the small wooden table inside the house to share a simple meal with a young girl. The little girl looks absolutely adorable while she holds her bowl and drinks her soup with big, curious eyes. Our girl gently slides her own bowl of food across the table toward the hungry child. The kid stops eating and looks up with a surprised expression because she did not expect more. Lizzie explains that she knows the child is still hungry, and that is why she is giving her the extra portion. The little girl points a finger and reminds Lizzie that she needs to eat her fill to stay healthy, insisting they are both equally hungry. The little girl puts her small hands on both bowls and looks up at Lizzie with a conflicted expression, clearly feeling guilty about taking the extra food. Our girl gives her a warm and gentle smile to try and ease the tension in the room. She is clearly touched by how much this little child cares about her well-being during such a difficult time. Sudden violent blows strike the wooden door, shattering the quiet morning with a sound like a terrifying alarm. The mother immediately pulls her daughter into a protective hug, while a voice from outside orders her to listen to the council's latest decree. The village leaders decided that one of the soldiers will now become her husband, and she is ordered to head back into the mountains tomorrow. The man orders her to bring food to the village entrance at dawn to welcome the soldiers, leaving Lizzie in a state of absolute despair. Her mind starts racing with pure panic because she never expected the village elders to make a decision this fast. The gravity of the situation finally hits her, as she admits she is petrified at the thought of being forced back into a life of abuse. Shaking uncontrollably, she realizes that running away is no longer an option and holds the child close while feeling completely hopeless about their future. Even though they haven't been together very long, she cannot bring herself to leave this poor innocent child behind. Tears start streaming down her face as she realizes she cannot let this kid be left all alone again. The little girl looks up with big fat tears in her eyes as she feels the sadness radiating from Lizzie. Finally, the poor kid just breaks down and starts sobbing uncontrollably while burying her face in the woman's lap. The sound of her crying fills the empty room, making the whole situation feel even more tragic. Lizzie sits alone in the dim light of the cabin and stares blankly ahead while wondering what will happen to her now that her fate is sealed. She curls up into a ball on the floor, trying to hide from a reality that she just cannot face. She looks down with a heavy heart while contemplating the unfair reality forced upon her family and wondering how they will ever survive this nightmare. She looks over at the little girl sleeping soundly on the floor and realizes this innocent child is trapped in the exact same miserable boat. This poor 5-year-old child doesn't even have a proper name yet and is known only as the daughter of the man who recently died. The trauma of her past starts to surface as she remembers the day her own father betrayed her and sold her for a single rabbit pelt. On the very first day she arrived at the cabin, the man who was supposed to be her husband turned out to be a violent monster. She was cowering on the floor in her memories, while that monster loomed over her and prepared to strike again. The realization that this wretched life was only just beginning crushed her spirit more than any of his physical blows. She lay there on the cold wood, battered and bruised, while the reality of her miserable existence and endless suffering finally began to settle in. As she lay there in pain, she noticed the little girl standing in the corner and watching her with wide eyes. Her face was bruised, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of physical agony and total emotional defeat. The little girl just stood there and watched with fearful eyes as Lizzie suffered through yet another day of pure physical and emotional agony. Finally, the child just collapses onto the floor beside her to share in the silence of their shared misery. This little blonde girl looks absolutely heartbroken as she gazes down with big teary eyes at someone who is clearly suffering. Lizzie reflects on her darkest moments and remembers that this angel-like child was the only one who ever showed her any real kindness. The mother and daughter are both huddled together on the cold floor of a wooden shack, trying to find comfort in the silence. Rumors spread through the village that a man was devoured by wolves, leaving behind nothing but bloodied scraps of clothing in the hunting grounds. Our girl felt a temporary wave of relief wash over her when she heard the news, but it was not meant to last. The world around her starts to blur into static as the weight of her harsh reality finally begins to sink in again. She stares blankly into the distance as the soul-crushing weight of her desperate situation finally begins to take its toll. Life is cruel to a woman left without a husband, and she finds herself standing alone in a room full of dark shadows. She leads her daughter through the quiet village streets, while the local windmill spins lazily in the background of their lonely journey. Suddenly, the little girl stops in her tracks and points at something in the distance, while the surrounding crowds begin to whisper loudly. A prisoner sits slumped inside a heavy wooden cage as the cart rattles along the dirt path toward the center of town. She finds herself drawn toward the cage by a haunting sense of familiarity that makes every step feel heavier than the last. They stand right in front of the cage, and the silence between them is deafening as she looks at the man inside the cart. Her eyes widen in complete disbelief when she finally recognizes the person staring back at her from behind those iron bars with a shocked expression. Her pupils start shaking as the sheer terror of the situation begins to take hold, and her heart feels like it is stopping. A voice from her past echoes in her mind screaming that she is a useless wretch who can't do anything right for anyone. The trauma comes flooding back in an instant as she remembers a man who used to strike her without a second thought during her darkest days. A monster of a man looms over her with a fork in his hand and a shadow covering his face as he dominates the room. He mocks her for putting on a dramatic show, saying she is acting out even though they have only just met, and the tension is unbearable. The sound of something shattering echoes through her memory as the domestic nightmare continues to haunt her every waking moment in this village. He spits out his final insult, telling her that she has completely ruined the only thing he actually cares about in this world. His silhouette stands tall against the darkness, as he declares that his appetite has been spoiled by her very presence and her failures. She cowers on the floor while clutching her daughter as the terrifying memory of her abusive husband's rage consumes her mind. She looks down at the fork on the floor, and all she can see is a reflection of her own misery in the metal. But then her focus shifts, and she sees the reflection of the man trapped inside the cage on the cart right before her eyes. She decides to take a risk and reaches into a basket to pull out 2 small loaves of crusty bread for the prisoner. Holding the bread tight, she stands there with the little girl while she prepares herself to do something incredibly brave and dangerous. She cautiously approaches the iron bars to offer her meager supply of food to the starving man, despite the potential consequences. Li Ho-yi stares up at the woman and child in total shock as they offer him a sudden lifeline in his darkest hour. An old man from the village approaches them with a cryptic question that makes the young mother tighten her grip on her child. The old man hands her a small wooden bowl, and she takes it with a look of genuine gratitude on her tired face. She gives the man in the cage a gentle smile, while her daughter watches him closely to see if he will actually eat. The little blonde girl stares at the prisoner with a mix of wonder and sympathy as she witnesses the quiet kindness of her mother. The prisoner clutches the small piece of bread with trembling hands while he processes the unexpected kindness of a total stranger. He finally takes a bite, and the sound of the metal chains clanking fills the air as he eats his first real meal. Guards burst into the room and scream for Li Ho-yi to get out there. Our boy is caught completely off guard as they roughly drag him out into the bright light of the day. He gets thrown onto the wooden floor with a brutal thud as the guards show zero mercy. This treatment is incredibly rough even for a prisoner like him. Li Ho-yi can only stare at a piece of bread while his stomach lets out a loud growl. He is absolutely starving and at his physical limit right now. The guards begin a brutal ritual by slicing the prisoner's arms to force them to sign mysterious contracts with their own blood. Blood drips onto the parchment while the men tremble in fear. It is clear that whatever they are signing away is something they will never be able to take back. Magic glows around the papers and seals the deal instantly in a flash of blue light. One of the men is totally baffled by this mystical display of power and wonders what kind of magic they are using. Li Ho-yi lets out a long sigh of resignation as he looks off to the side. He knows that fighting back right now is basically impossible given his weakened state. The village elder whispers something to one of the armored guards while keeping a close eye on the prisoners. It looks like they are making a final decision about what to do with our boy. Our protagonist stays on his knees while the 2 men look down on him with cold indifference. The power dynamic here is suffocating, and he has no choice but to wait for their next move. Exhaustion is written all over his face as he stares blankly ahead with sunken eyes. He has no idea what they have planned for him, but he knows it cannot be anything good. A quiet part of the village where things seem much more peaceful and calm. It is a sharp contrast to the violence and fear we just witnessed in the square. The family lives in extreme poverty and struggles to survive, while barely keeping enough supplies in the house to get through the week. A stern woman cold-heartedly reminds the mother that every bit of help they receive is a debt that must eventually be paid back in full. She is the one in total control of the household and makes it clear that no excuses will be tolerated from anyone under her roof. She describes the girl's future husband as a man who looks rough, but possesses hands and feet as soft as a pampered noble. The woman explains that the man has never laid a hand on anyone and will have to find a way to be useful since he cannot hunt. The woman promises a life of comfort if the man works hard, but the girl reveals that she has no interest in wealth or living well. She feels completely trapped and hopeless as her entire future is being decided by others, without her having any say in the matter. All she wants is someone who will just leave her and her daughter alone in a corner of the house. She gently strokes the head of the sleeping child while hoping for a peaceful life. Suddenly, a loud banging echoes through the small house and startles everyone inside. The village elder shouts from the other side of the door and demands that they open it immediately. The girl jumps in surprise, and her heart starts racing as she clutches her child even closer. The moment she has been dreading has finally arrived, and she is not ready for it. The terrifying reality sets in, as she realizes the man she is meant to marry is already standing right outside the door with the elder. The elder swings the door wide open and announces that he has finally brought the man she is supposed to marry. The girl is frozen in place and can only stare in shock. Panic seizes her because the moment that will change her life forever has finally arrived, and she is forced to face her grim fate. Lee Ho-yi walks into the room looking completely dazed and confused by his surroundings. He is looking around and wondering where on earth he has been taken this time by these people. She is horrified that they are forcing a sick and injured man to move around just to fulfill their ridiculous demands for a wedding. Tension fills the small room as these two total strangers are forced to confront the fact that they are now tied together forever. Desperation and terror take hold of her because she simply cannot believe this is the man she is expected to live with from now on. Lee Ho-yi feels a strange sense of familiarity with the woman, but cannot understand why she seems so absolutely terrified of his presence. He watches her shake with uncontrollable fear and wonders what kind of monster she thinks he is to be this frightened of him. The elder gets annoyed and asks why Lee Ho-yi is just standing there like an idiot. He grabs our boy by the arm and drags him closer to the trembling girl on the floor. The elder shoves Ho-yi forward to finalize the introduction, while the terrified child tries to hide from the massive stranger invading their home. To force a connection between them, the elder physically grabs their hands and presses them together, making the poor girl flinch from the contact. He lets out a loud laugh and says that standing like this, they look just like a real married couple. It is a twisted and uncomfortable situation for everyone in the small room. A dawning sense of realization hits Ho-yi as he finally understands the bizarre and unexpected role these villagers want him to play. Sudden flashes of a distorted memory begin to surface in his mind as he tries to connect the dots of this strange situation. An unhinged version of Santa Claus appears in his vision, screaming about finding a pure-hearted wife and a daughter who respects him. The vision flickers through the static as the reality of the situation settles into the room. Everything feels heavy while our boy tries to process this bizarre new world. The vision presents the bride as a fragile rabbit, which highlights just how overwhelmed and anxious the poor girl is in this scenario. The terrified child desperately clings to her mother, while wishing she could simply disappear rather than face the strangers invading her home. Even though the situation feels completely wrong, they are forced to stand together like a real family, while Ho-yi questions his new reality. Ho-yi is having a hard time accepting his new reality after being suddenly transported into a completely different world against his will. Dark memories of his past struggles flicker through his mind as he tries to make sense of his current situation. Life was never easy, and it seems this new world is not going to be any different. He questions whether all of this suffering was truly necessary to get what he wanted from that mysterious Santa character. If he ever runs into that Santa character again, he is definitely going to have some choice words for him. The frustration is clearly boiling over as he stares at the ground in silence. Our boy is fuming as he thinks about the man who put him here. He is wondering if there is any way to get back at him for this unwanted trip to another world. Our boy straight up declares that he is going to kill the man responsible for this mess. He is not playing around anymore, and that look in his eyes says he means every single word. Even in this adorable chibai form, his murderous aura is so intense that it terrifies the poor children standing nearby. The villagers try to speak with him, but everything they say sounds like complete nonsense because he cannot understand their language. It is incredibly frustrating to be surrounded by screaming locals when you have no idea what they are actually trying to say. The old man in the group turns his head, scanning the area with a look that suggests he might be the one in charge here. This random dude steps up and offers a handshake, but you can tell by the smirk on his face that he is looking for trouble. Our boy just stares at him, wondering what this idiot is trying to pull. They lock hands, and it is on. This is clearly a test of strength disguised as a friendly greeting. Suddenly, the tension spikes as our boy decides to stop playing nice and clamps down with a crushing grip. You can almost hear the bones groaning under the pressure he is putting on this guy's hand. The challenger is immediately regretting every life choice that led him to this moment. He is shaking like a leaf and sweating bullets, while Li Houyi just looks at him with total indifference. He makes sure to establish dominance with just a single look that tells everyone he is not someone to be messed with. The arrogant challenger is forced to his knees in agony, as he realizes he picked a fight with the wrong person today. Instead of being angry, the village elder seems absolutely delighted to witness such an overwhelming display of raw power from the newcomer. The old man walks over with a bow and arrow, signaling that it is time for a little hunting lesson. Meanwhile, the loser from before is still nursing his crushed hand on the grass like a total joke. To show him how it is done, the veteran hunter draws back the string with perfect form. He is making it look easy, but we all know archery is way harder than it looks on TV. Now it's our boy's turn to step up to the plate. He takes the bow, feeling the weight of it, and tries to remember everything he has ever seen about shooting arrows. The old man starts doing some hilarious interpretive dance to explain what they are hunting. He is hopping around like a maniac, while Li Houyi just watches him with a very confused expression. The old man starts hopping around and mimicking a rabbit to show exactly what kind of prey they are supposed to hunt. Ah, okay, so he wants me to learn how to hunt. It finally clicks for our boy as he gets into position and prepares to take his first shot. The old man suddenly freezes and signals that he has spotted something in the brush. His eyes go wide, and he starts waving his hands frantically to get our boy's attention. He points toward a bush, shouting something that probably translates to "There it is, shoot it now." The pressure is on, and the whole village is basically watching to see if he is actually useful. A little white rabbit just minding its own business and snacking on some leaves. It has no idea that a novice archer is currently aiming a lethal weapon right at its fluffy head. The old man is basically losing his mind, screaming for our boy to take the shot before the rabbit bolts. Li Houyi is trying to stay calm, but his heart is definitely racing a bit. He tries to focus on his target while remembering the basics of archery, but his hands are shaking from the intense pressure. His first shot goes completely wild and misses the mark, while the rabbit just stares back with a very confused expression. He feels completely humiliated as the village elder claps and laughs at his pathetic attempt to hit a stationary target. Someone else starts calling out from a distance, and the sound catches his attention. He looks up, wondering who is coming to join their failed hunting party. A group of women returns from the forest, carrying baskets full of supplies, and they seem curious about the stranger in their village. His heart starts racing, and he cannot look away from the beautiful woman who just appeared in front of him out of nowhere. He finds out that this gorgeous woman is supposed to be his bride, and suddenly this new life is looking much better. We leave our protagonist with his face turning beet red as his heart beats out of his chest. This is the moment he realizes his new life might actually have some major perks. Our boy Li Houyi is still trying to wrap his head around the situation while everyone stares him down. Even in this tiny chibai form, you can tell he is feeling the pressure of his new life. They decide to sit down for a meal in the middle of this beautiful forest clearing to try and break the ice. It is a quiet moment under the canopy as they gather on a simple white sheet. The atmosphere is thick enough to cut with a knife as everyone stays silent while preparing to eat. No one really knows what to say to the mysterious man who is now part of their lives. A bowl of warm stew is placed in front of him, and it actually looks pretty decent for a meal in the wild. You can almost smell the savory broth and tender vegetables through the screen. Eating a meal becomes a very awkward experience, because his new family members are watching his every move with extreme curiosity. Suddenly he stops and looks up, which clearly startles the poor woman and her young daughter. They react like they expect him to snap at them, but he is just finished with his first bite. He stares intensely, as if he is trying to process every single detail of his new reality and the people in it. The silence stretches out for a long moment while he searches for the right words. A small, gentle smile finally breaks across his face, and he seems to relax just a little bit. It is a rare moment of peace for a guy who has been through absolute hell lately. He reflects on how alien the concept of family feels to him after spending decades completely alone. It is a sudden realization that hits him harder than any monster he has ever faced in this brand new world. Seeing them eat so tentatively makes him realize that they are officially his responsibility now. He accepts this new burden with a heavy heart, but a firm resolve to see them through safely. He questions if the order of events even matters anymore given the chaotic nature of his arrival. Despite the internal conflict, he knows that he must set aside his doubts to ensure their safety. Looking up at the sky, he takes a deep breath to steel his nerves for the long journey ahead of them. The sun filters through the trees as he prepares himself for the challenges of being a protector. They finish up their quiet meal and prepare to leave the peaceful clearing behind to continue their trek. It is time to get back to the mission and find a safe place to settle down. The very next morning, the group sets out on a long journey through the dense woods. Ho-yi carries the massive load, while the mother and daughter struggle to maintain his rapid pace. He keeps a steady pace, but he can hear by the heavy sound of their footsteps that they are falling behind. Even with his superhuman endurance, he can feel the humidity starting to wear them down. The mother and her daughter are reaching their physical limits as they gasp for air in the thick forest heat. Their faces are flushed from exertion, and they look like they might collapse at any moment. He looks back and realizes the hike is taking a much heavier toll on his companions than he anticipated. They are giving it their all, but their legs are clearly shaking from the constant strain. He tells himself that he needs to adapt to the rules of this new world as fast as possible. His focus is no longer just on his own survival, but on the lives of the two people trailing behind him. Without saying a single word, he brings his heavy boots to a sudden halt on the dusty dirt path. The silence that follows is immediate as the woman and child stop right behind him in surprise. His mind drifts back to a memory of a woman giving him some vital advice about the nature of strength. She taught him that when you have someone to protect, hesitation is a luxury you can no longer afford. The warmth in her eyes as she smiles at him in this memory serves as a powerful reminder of her teachings. He knows that he must carry her lessons with him as he prepares to face the realities of this harsh new world. He turns around with a look of pure determination that catches the mother and daughter completely off guard. They stare at him with wide eyes, wondering why their protector has suddenly stopped in his tracks. Ho-yi begins walking back toward the exhausted pair while they watch him with worried expressions. He understands that they will never reach their destination if they continue moving at this snail's pace. The little girl is on the verge of tears as she looks up at her new guardian with a look of pure terror. She clutches her hands together and whimpers, terrified that she has done something to upset him. He drops down to one knee and gently tells them both not to be scared of what he is about to do. He needs them to trust him completely if they are going to get through this difficult trek in one piece. His voice is calm and reassuring as he prepares to help them out. The woman freezes up, and her face turns completely pale as she wonders what his intentions are. Her heart is pounding against her ribs while she stares at him in a state of total shock and confusion. The woman begins to speak in a desperate, trembling tone, her words a mystery to him as she tries to understand his intentions. She clasps her hands together and looks at him with a mixture of fear and profound confusion. Tears start rolling down the little girl's cheeks as the overwhelming stress of the journey finally breaks her. She lets out a heartbroken cry as she stares up at the man kneeling in front of her. Ho-yi stands back up looking like an absolute unit, despite the massive pack strapped to his shoulders. He looks down at the crying child with a calm expression that hides his internal resolve. He asks for their permission to step in for a moment as he moves toward them with clear purpose. He is tired of seeing them suffer, and he is ready to show them what a real protector can do. With a sudden burst of strength, he reaches out and scoops the little girl into his arms as if she weighs nothing. The mother is stunned into silence by the effortless way he handles the situation. Before the mother can even think about protesting, he grabs her too and pulls her into a powerful embrace. She lets out a startled cry as she finds herself being lifted off the ground alongside her child. Now he is standing there holding both of them with ease while still supporting that massive supply pack on his back. He looks like a true fantasy hero as he carries the entire family through the rough terrain. Her brain completely short-circuits as she looks up at him with a face that is bright red from embarrassment. She never expected this kind of treatment, and she is left totally speechless as she clings to his neck. Our boy is carrying a giant pack and two grown people while walking through the woods like it is the easiest thing in the world. This is a massive display of power that is sure to win over his new companions. The little girl looks up with wide, sparkly eyes as she hitches a ride on top of their supplies. She seems completely mesmerized by how easy our boy makes this look. She reaches out a tiny hand toward the horizon as they move deeper into the forest. Something ahead has definitely caught her attention as they keep moving. Ho-yi tells the woman to hold on tight as he secures her against his side with surprising ease. She is absolutely stunned by his raw physical strength, and her face heats up from the sudden closeness. This man is an absolute beast for walking through the woods while carrying 2 people and a massive supply pack. Even with all that extra weight, he thinks to himself that they feel far too light for their own good. As he marches forward with his heavy load, he realizes that his next priority is mastering the local language. He needs to figure out how to hunt properly so he can feed them plenty of meat. The woman looks down at him with a complex expression as she realizes just how much she is relying on this mysterious stranger. She looks exhausted, but a hint of relief shines in her eyes as she rests against him. A single drop of sweat rolls down the back of his neck as the humidity of the forest starts to set in. Even a powerhouse like him has to feel the heat eventually. She slowly reaches out toward his dark hair, perhaps wanting to brush away the sweat or just confirm he is actually real. Her hand hesitates in the air for a second. Her fingers stop just short of touching him as she suddenly freezes up. The intimacy of the moment seems to be hitting her all at once. She pulls her hand back and clutches her chest, looking down with a somber expression. It is like she is reminding herself not to get too comfortable with this situation just yet. Ho-yi carries the girls and a massive pack of supplies through the woods as they follow their elderly guide to their new home. Ho-yi bows deeply to thank the old man for his help, but the villager just grunts back in a language he cannot understand. The old man turns his back and heads back into the forest without a word, leaving the group alone at the edge of their new property. He turns his attention to the rustic house and notices just how much work it is going to need. The roof looks shaky, and the whole place has an abandoned vibe. Suddenly, a dark memory flashes through his mind of someone sitting in total darkness with heavy shackles on their feet. The trauma of the past is clearly never too far away from his thoughts. He clenches his arms and starts to shiver, looking physically distressed as the weight of his memories or the cold hits him hard. His eyes look intense and full of a quiet rage. He reaches out toward the wooden door of the hut, his hand trembling slightly as he prepares to see what is inside. This is their fresh start. The door creaks open, and he lets out a confused sound when he sees someone already standing in the dim light. He was not expecting anyone to be there. It is the woman from before, and she looks just as surprised as he is to be caught in such a small space together. Her eyes are wide, and she looks totally flustered. The tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a knife, as they both stand there awkwardly staring at each other. Ho-yi reaches out as if to say something, but the words won't come. She cannot handle the awkwardness and practically teleports past him to get out of the house. She rushes into the sunlight without looking back for even a second. He watches her bolt out the door before turning his attention to the interior of the hut, only to find the shelves completely bare. The sudden realization of their dire situation hits him like a ton of bricks as he stares into the empty, lightless room. The poor girl collapses in the field and breaks down in tears once she realizes the villagers stole every single thing they owned. Despair washes over her as she thinks about the coming winter and how she has no way to defend herself against wild beasts. Ho-yi eventually tracks her down in the tall grass and calmly lets her know that he finally found where she was hiding. He sits down on the grass next to her without saying a word, just offering his presence as the sun continues to dip lower. She stays huddled up, still lost in her own misery. In a surprisingly tender move, he reaches out and places a large hand on top of her head. She looks up at him with tears streaming down her face, completely shocked by the gesture. His hand is warm and steady against her hair, and for a moment, the overwhelming fear she felt starts to ebb away. She cannot stop the tears from falling. She gazes at him while he gently pats her head, wondering if this is his way of telling her not to worry about anything. Even without words, his intent feels clear. Even though she is still crying, she looks at the man she is destined to live with and feels a spark of hope. She worries about their survival since they cannot communicate, and he seemingly has no idea how to hunt despite living in the mountains. Doubts continue to flood her mind as she wonders if they can truly survive together in such a harsh and unforgiving environment. Ho-yi offers a very subtle and gentle smile, showing a side of himself that is far removed from the cold warrior he usually appears to be. He looks at her with a kind expression and promises that he will protect her no matter what happens next. She still feels a huge amount of anxiety and doubt about their future together in this place. Yet, as she looks into his eyes, something about his steady gaze makes her want to believe that everything might actually turn out okay. As a final tear falls from her eye, she looks up at him and wonders why his presence suddenly makes her feel so relieved. Our boy Kim Joo-won is reflecting on his original world while sitting in a golden field. Things have clearly changed for him, and he is not alone anymore. He reaches out to comfort the woman beside him with a gentle pat on the shoulder. Now that he has a family in this new place, Joo-won feels like there is absolutely nothing he cannot endure for their sake. He pulls the woman into a firm hug, promising to be their rock while the sun sets behind the trees. The woman lets out a heavy sigh as she leans into his touch, finally feeling like she can breathe again. Joo-won looks down at her with a soft expression, knowing that the weight they have been carrying is finally being shared. Joo-won provides a comforting shoulder for the woman as she finally lets her guard down in the quiet forest. However, the emotional moment is hilariously interrupted by the loud growling of his very hungry stomach. Suddenly, a little blonde girl comes charging toward them with a determined look on her face. She is shouting for him to stop, thinking that her mother is in some kind of trouble and needs to be rescued immediately. The little girl lunges forward and wraps her arms around her mother, acting like a tiny human shield. She tells Joo-won in no uncertain terms to stop bullying Lizzie, showing an incredible amount of bravery for someone so small. Joo-won just sits there and takes it, realizing that building trust with this duo is going to take a lot more than just a hug. They are all gathered under the canopy of the forest, 3 lost souls trying to find their way together. He looks down at the woman who was just crying in his arms, feeling a deep sense of responsibility. The sight of the child weeping beside her makes his heart ache in a way he did not expect. Everything about this situation is completely unfamiliar to him, but he knows he cannot just walk away from them now. Joo-won flashes back to the moment this woman gave him bread when he had nothing at all. He wonders why she was crying back then, and what kind of pain she has been hiding from the world this whole time. He pulls them both into a protective embrace and makes a silent vow to make them happier than anyone else. He promises that he will never let either of them cry like this ever again as long as he is around. Standing by the edge of the water, Joo-won swears that neither of them will ever regret becoming part of his family. The golden light of the forest creates a peaceful atmosphere for this life-changing moment between the 3 of them. The trio makes their way to a small, humble wooden hut tucked away in the safety of the trees. Once they get inside, the atmosphere shifts from emotional to incredibly awkward very fast. They all sit on the floor in total silence, not really knowing what to do with themselves now that the crying has finally stopped. Joo-won thinks to himself that they were getting closer while they were crying, but now they are back to square one. He fidgets nervously on the floor, feeling the heavy weight of the silence filling the entire room. Joo-won realizes that while the pair isn't terrified of him anymore, there is still a thick layer of awkwardness to break through. He wonders how he can possibly begin a normal life with them when they are still so wary. Our boy strokes his chin, trying to come up with a way to break the ice and start a conversation. He suddenly shifts his position to speak, which causes the woman and the child to flinch in surprise. They are still clearly on edge, watching his every move like he might suddenly turn back into a monster at any second. Joo-won points a finger at himself and clearly states his name is Kim Joo-won. He figures that the best way to start a relationship is by introducing himself properly to his new companions. He explains that even if they cannot communicate perfectly yet, they should at least know each other's names. It is a simple first step, but it feels monumental in a room full of strangers trying to become a unit. The woman looks at him with wide, surprised eyes, as if she did not expect him to be so straightforward. Joo-won gestures toward her next, encouraging her to share her own name so they can finally move past the silence. She hesitates for a moment, her lips parting as she tries to find the words to respond to him. The woman looks back up at Juwon and finally reveals that her name is Lizzie. It is a soft, quiet reveal, but it feels like a massive breakthrough for the group's dynamic moving forward. Juwon repeats the name and tells her that Lizzie is a very pretty name while giving her a friendly nod. He is trying his absolute best to be charming and supportive to keep the mood light and welcoming. Next, he turns his attention to the little girl who is still huddled nervously near her mother. She looks up at him with big, curious eyes, wondering what this strange man is going to say to her next. Lizzie looks over at the child as well, and the room falls into another expectant silence for a moment. Juwon realizes that the little girl might not even have a name, yet based on the way they are acting. He asks the question directly, looking at the child with a mix of pity and concern for her situation. The little girl looks down at the floor with a sad expression, confirming his suspicions without saying a single word. Juwon feels a surge of protectiveness, wanting to give her something that truly belongs to her. He reaches out and gently places a hand on her head, telling her that he will give her a name himself. The girl looks up at him with sparkling eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand and his genuine kindness. A dreamy sequence begins as Juwon thinks of the perfect name for a girl who is about to go on a journey. In his mind, he sees figures from a classic story appearing like symbols of hope and friendship. Kim Juwon thinks about the classic story of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. She was a girl who went on amazing adventures with her loyal friends to find her own happiness, and he wants the same for this child. He tells her she will grow up to be just as lovely as the girl in the stories. As he speaks, images of white doves and picture books fill the air like a beautiful promise for her future. The little girl looks at him with pure wonder, her eyes glowing with a newfound sense of belonging and joy. Juwon tells her that her new name will allow her to meet many good friends and loved ones in her life. The little girl's eyes light up with pure joy as she looks at her new protector with a sense of wonder. It seems like she finally feels safe enough to let her true, innocent personality shine through. The sky reflects the changing mood of their new life together as the sun begins to set over the horizon. Juwon is out here putting in that work, swinging a heavy axe to chop wood for their survival. Each strike is filled with raw power, echoing through the quiet forest as he prepares for their new life together. Lizzie watches him from behind a tree, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and confusion about this mysterious man. She thinks to herself that he is truly a bizarre individual, unlike anyone she has ever met. Even though he has a much larger body and stronger hands than the people who used to hurt her, he never shows aggression. Instead of hitting her, he treats her with a gentleness that she is still trying to understand. She stares at the mysterious man and realizes he is completely different from anyone else she has ever met in her life. Thinking about the harsh reality of her upbringing causes a wave of deep sadness to wash over her heart. She recalls the traumatic memories of being cornered and mistreated by the people who were actually supposed to protect her. Lee Ho-yi gives her a warm, genuine smile that seems to melt away all the icy fear she has been carrying. She watches him work and decides that a man with such an impressive aura does not truly belong in this simple village. He spots her watching and gives a friendly wave, calling out her name with a cheerfulness that catches her off guard. She focuses on his features, specifically noting his black hair and dark eyes that seem to hold a million secrets. Her thoughts begin to swirl into a dark void as she recalls a specific piece of information she heard recently. Rumors have been spreading like wildfire about a country at war that finally succeeded in summoning a legendary hero. People everywhere are whispering about the arrival of a savior who is destined to change the fate of the world forever. The legendary summoning actually worked, and now the enemy nation is celebrating while everyone else lives in fear of this new power. Our girl thinks about the description of this hero, a warrior with black hair and black eyes who really exists. He walks back toward the camp with a calm expression, while she continues to scrutinize his every move from a distance. She compares his face to the legendary hero from the stories, and feels a jolt of nervous energy from the physical similarity. The girl tries to convince herself that a world-saving warrior would never be found living as a mountain keeper in a modest village. Her mind races with impossible theories about his identity, even though she knows the stories might just be empty rumors. She looks closer and notices his hair is actually more brown than black, which makes her feel silly for being so suspicious. Our girl lets out a quiet sigh of relief, feeling the tension finally leave her shoulders as she relaxes her guard. She looks down bashfully, still feeling a bit embarrassed about how much she has been analyzing his every move and feature. He looks at her with a puzzled expression, wondering why she is acting so flustered and avoiding eye contact all of a sudden. Our boy reaches out and places a gentle hand on her head, giving her a soft and reassuring pat. She freezes in place, thinking to herself that she is absolutely not used to being touched with such genuine affection. She starts to get emotional after realizing that a hand reaching for her used to always mean she was about to be hit. The warmth of his palm against her hair feels like a shield against all the bad things she has ever experienced. She closes her eyes and leans into the touch, whispering to herself that this sensation feels incredibly nice and safe. A deep longing takes over her heart as she wishes he would never stop giving her this much needed affection and warmth. Ho Yi begins to blush when he realizes how she is reacting to his touch, making the entire situation feel much more intimate. Our girl looks up at him with teary eyes and a bright blush, looking more vulnerable and beautiful than he has ever seen. The two of them share a deep and emotional kiss under the golden light of the trees, while all of her past traumas disappear. The sudden display of affection leaves him completely stunned, and he starts blushing like a middle schooler who has no idea what to do. Our boy Lee Ho Yi is completely short-circuited. After that intense moment, the girl is basically a human ice cube, totally frozen in place by the sudden shock of it all. Look at his face, everyone. He is sweating bullets and turning a deeper shade of red by the second, as the awkwardness of the situation finally hits him hard. Instead of saying anything smooth, Lee Ho Yi decides his best move is to grab his wooden bucket and get out of there as fast as possible. He grips the handle with everything he has got. It is like he is trying to squeeze the embarrassment right out of his system before he explodes from the tension. And just like that, he bolts. He is running into the forest like a track star while our girl stands there in total silence, wondering what just happened to her heart. She's literally steaming from the blush. She clutches her chest, heart probably racing at 1,000 miles per hour after Lee Ho Yi made his sudden, clumsy exit into the woods. He wanders aimlessly through the forest with his bucket, while spiraling about the awkward impression he just made on his new wife. He clutches his head in frustration because he realizes they only just met today, despite the fact that they are technically married. The sun goes down and the woods get way creepier, but he is too busy sulking to notice his surroundings. He just keeps trudging along, looking like he wants the ground to swallow him whole. Suddenly, his feet come to a grinding halt. Something in the air just shifted, and his survival instincts finally kick in over his romantic drama. Ho Yi stops and looks around at the thick, foggy trees, realizing he has wandered way further than he intended, while becoming very aware that he is all alone in the dark forest. A strange rustle comes from the shadows. It is not the wind, and it definitely sounds like something heavy is moving through the underbrush just out of sight. There it is again, that low growl vibrating through the trees. The atmosphere goes from awkward romance to a straight-up horror movie in the blink of an eye. Lee Ho Yi freezes, cold sweat dripping down his neck as a sudden chill runs down his spine. He knows he is being watched by something that definitely does not want to be friends. He slowly turns around and feels his heart drop when he sees a massive shadow with glowing red eyes looming over him from the deep darkness of the trees. His brain barely manages to register the threat. A wolf, out here and at a size that definitely looks more like a monster than a regular animal. Things are looking pretty grim since our hero is standing there with nothing but a wooden bucket to defend himself against a massive beast that is baring its razor-sharp teeth and growling with hunger. Out of nowhere, a massive wolf with glowing red eyes blocks the path in the middle of the dark forest. Ho Yi realizes his life is on the line and drops everything to scramble for any weapon he can find nearby. He manages to grab a sturdy-looking branch off the ground, though he knows it is a long shot against a monster like this. He holds his breath, waiting for the beast to make its move while his hands tremble. He grips the wood so hard his knuckles turn white, while his heart beats like a drum in his chest. The wolf does not wait for an invitation, and lunges straight for him with a terrifying and bloodthirsty roar. The beast snaps its jaws shut right onto the wooden branch, while nearly ripping it out of our boy's hands. He is getting pushed back, as the monster continues its relentless assault with its powerful jaws. With a desperate cry, Ho-Yi puts everything he has into a counter swing to get the beast off him. The wolf swipes at him with a heavy claw, sending a shockwave of pain through his arms as he barely blocks. Our boy is struggling to keep the jaws away from his throat as the wood starts to splinter under the pressure. Ho-Yi charges toward the monster with his fist drawn back, determined to strike while the creature is vulnerable. Something inside him finally snaps as he feels a surge of adrenaline like he has never experienced before. He connects a massive blow right to the wolf's snout, sending it reeling back in pain and surprise. His whole body is in pain, and he feels like he is literally on fire as the power awakens within. The agony is overwhelming as he screams out into the night air while the forest echoes with his cries. It feels as if his blood is boiling within his veins, and he cannot stop the sensation. The beast lets out a high-pitched shriek as it senses the change in the atmosphere and the heat rising. As his fist connects with the wolf, actual flames erupt from his arm, engulfing the monster's head in a sudden, brilliant blaze. Ho-Yi stares in absolute disbelief as his own arm spontaneously combusts into a brilliant blaze. He has no idea how he's doing this, but the heat is definitely real, and things are about to get wild. Adrenaline takes over, and he slams his burning fist right into the wolf as it tries to roar one last time. He follows up with a series of brutal strikes, each one leaving scorched marks on the monster's thick hide as he vents his rage. Ho-Yi goes into a total frenzy, pummeling the creature with everything he has, until it finally stops moving for good. The giant wolf lies still on the ground, smoke rising from its fur, where the flames made contact during the final struggle. Our boy breathes heavily while staring at the bloody aftermath of the fight. He somehow managed to survive against all odds. He collapses onto the grass, while his mind races with questions about what just happened during the intense struggle. Ho-Yi sits up and checks his arm, noticing that there are not even any burn marks on his skin or clothes. He touches his face with his soot-covered hands, trying to make sure this isn't all just some crazy hallucination or dream. He starts thinking about those classic stories, where a regular guy falls into another world and gains insane powers. If that is really the case, he decides he needs to test out how to trigger this power again right now. Our boy reaches toward the sky with a look of determination, ready to see if he can become a hero in this world. Our boy starts screaming out every classic magic spell name he can think of, like fireball, hoping something will happen. He tries calling out for a firewall and a dozen other variations, but the forest remains silent and his hands stay normal. The wolf just sits there dead, while Ho-Yi realizes that shouting random words might not be the most effective way to use magic. After the chaos settles, our hero is left looking like a total mess while trying to figure out the logic. Then he thinks about his family and how being a hunter with this kind of power could change their lives forever for the better. He imagines a future where he can provide a better home and feed his family the best food possible. Ho-Yi rolls onto his stomach, feeling a new sense of purpose despite the confusion and the danger he just faced in the woods. Ho-Yi takes a moment to compose himself in the quiet field because his brain is basically melting from the fight. Life has a funny way of repeating itself, and for Lee Ho-Yi, the cycle was about to hit its peak once again. It had not been long since his parents passed away when fate decided to take his grandfather too, leaving him truly alone in a cold world. The grief was not the only thing he had to deal with, because his relatives were absolute monsters who needed a scapegoat for their own pain. His uncle actually had the nerve to punch him, screaming that his own father and brother died just because they had to live with our boy. Everyone stood around watching while this man pointed a finger and called our boy the root cause of every single tragedy that hit the family. Those dark memories of being blamed for things out of his control began to fade into the fog of his past as the scene shifted. Back in the present, Lee Ho-Yi looked a bit rough around the edges with dirt smudging his face, but his eyes were filled with focus. He was definitely doing more than just surviving out here, as he hauled a massive load of dark fur over his sturdy shoulders. The weight of a giant black wolf did not seem to slow him down one bit as he marched through the thick green forest alone. There was a faint, weary smile on his face as he adjusted the heavy carcass, feeling the true weight of his hard-earned victory. He looks up at the radiant moon and thinks about how his grandfather would have been so proud of the man he became today. He is no longer that weak child mourning at a funeral, but a hunter who can finally provide for his loved ones. As he got closer to home, he reached up to keep the massive beast balanced, ready to show off the results of his long day of hunting. Inside a cozy little cabin, a warm fire was crackling in the hearth, while a woman and a young girl went about their evening routine. The woman was busy preparing a meal, while little Dorothy skipped around the room with a plate, her blonde hair bouncing with every happy step. It was such a peaceful domestic scene, as the lady reached out to give Dorothy a gentle head pat, clearly cherishing this quiet moment together. Dorothy beamed with pure joy, her eyes crinkling as she leaned into the affection, unaware that something was approaching the house from the dark woods. The energetic little girl suddenly spotted something through the window and raced across the wooden floor to get a better look at the visitor. She stood on her tiptoes to peek over the windowsill, her curiosity getting the better of her as she wondered if someone was finally home. She peers out into the darkness and catches a glimpse of something strange lurking right outside the window. Her curiosity quickly turns into confusion as she tries to make out the shape of the visitor in the moonlight. A massive wolf head suddenly comes into view, and the poor girl lets out a blood-curdling scream that echoes through the entire house. She is paralyzed with fear as the cold eyes of the predator stare directly into her soul. The woman hears the terrifying scream and immediately drops everything to see what is happening to her precious little girl. She sees the monstrous beast at the window and calls out for Dorothy to get away from the glass. Without wasting a single second, she grabbed a sharp kitchen knife from the table, prepared to defend her home and the little girl from any monster. She sprints toward the entrance with the blade gripped tightly in her hand, while shouting for the girl to stay back. Her maternal instincts have completely taken over, and she is ready to die protecting her home from this intruder. The woman freezes in her tracks as she takes a closer look at the monster and realizes it is not moving at all. The sheer terror in her heart begins to fade as she notices a familiar figure standing behind the beast. Outside, our boy was actually struggling to stay upright under the weight of the wolf, exhaling a heavy groan as his legs nearly gave out. She stands in the doorway with her weapon ready, but stops when she sees that the massive wolf is actually being carried by a human. The realization that this is her partner returning home from a successful hunt makes her heart skip a beat. Li Ho-yi finally let the massive black wolf slide off his back, and the heavy carcass hit the dirt with a dull thud that shook the ground. He took a deep breath as the woman and Dorothy slowly realized that they were not actually being attacked by a living wild predator. Tears stream down her face as the adrenaline leaves her body, and the crushing weight of terror turns into pure relief. She can barely keep herself upright after believing for a moment that a monster was about to devour her family. The sharp kitchen knife slipped from her fingers and landed in the grass with a quiet metallic ring as her survival instincts finally shut down. She threw herself at him and grabbed his face, her hands shaking as she checked to make sure he was actually alive and uninjured from the hunt. Little Dorothy was not far behind, sobbing as she grabbed onto his leg, her tiny frame shaking from the trauma of seeing that wolf head. Our hero is a bit surprised by their overwhelming emotional reaction and tries his best to calm them down with gentle words. He assures them that he is perfectly fine and that the dangerous predator is nothing more than a trophy now. The woman buried her face in his chest and hugged him with everything she had, whispering how glad she was that he made it back safely. He blushed as she kept repeating those words, wondering why she was so emotional over a hunt, but he held her tight regardless of his confusion. Little Dorothy continues to cry her eyes out while clinging to his leg as if she never wants to let go again. Seeing them both so devastated makes him feel a massive wave of guilt for scaring them so badly with his entrance. The sun begins to rise over the distant mountains as a lone raven perches on the rooftop to watch the new day begin. After a night filled with such intense emotions, the morning brings a much-needed sense of peace to the household. Our protagonist wastes no time and gets right to work butchering the massive beast he brought home the night before. He carefully uses his knife to carve through the thick hide so he can start processing the valuable meat and fur. The sharp blade sinks deep into the fresh meat as he works with the steady precision of a man who knows exactly what he is doing. This job is incredibly messy and tiring, but it is necessary to ensure his family has plenty of food. He tosses a piece of the heavy fur aside and realizes this whole process is going to take a lot longer than he anticipated. Doing everything by hand without any modern tools is a real grind that tests his patience. He knows he has to keep moving if he wants to finish before sunset. He has to take a quick break to wipe the sweat from his brow and catch his breath for a few seconds. Even for someone with his strength, performing this kind of manual labor without any help is proving to be quite a challenge. He refuses to let the exhaustion slow him down and gets right back to slicing the meat into manageable portions for storage. The rhythmic sound of his knife hitting the wood is the only thing filling the quiet workshop as he concentrates. The heavy wooden door suddenly creaks open, and a familiar silhouette appears against the bright light coming from outside. Someone has arrived to check on his progress and see if he needs any assistance with the remaining work. He looks up with a very warm and gentle expression the moment he realizes exactly who just walked into the room. It is clear that he is happy to have some company to help him get through this tedious task. He calls out her name, Lizzie, as she approaches him with a kind look in her eyes. She is carrying a large wooden bucket, likely here to help him carry all the processed meat back to the kitchen area. Our boy is grateful for the help because his arms are starting to feel like lead after all that butchering. Lizzie gestures with a warm smile and asks him to start filling the large wooden container with the fresh meat she brought along. He experiences a small moment of triumph as he realizes he is actually starting to understand her foreign language much more clearly. He hits a bit of a mental roadblock while desperately trying to remember the proper way to say thank you in this strange world. He rubs the back of his neck and awkwardly stammers out his gratitude while feeling embarrassed by his own clumsy pronunciation. Lizzie is clearly touched by his sincere effort to communicate, and a soft blush creeps onto her cheeks as she gazes up at him. He looks a bit lost and confused when she starts giggling at his obvious awkwardness and shy demeanor during their conversation. She playfully repeats the word back to him to ensure he knows exactly how it should sound when spoken correctly in her tongue. The atmosphere shifts as he takes a slow and deliberate step toward her, making their interaction feel much more intimate and personal. He looks down at her with an incredibly soft smile and says thank you again with a steady voice full of genuine affection. Lizzie looks at him with those wide eyes, totally mesmerized by our boy and his kind words. Lizzie is completely stunned because our boy just thanked her for something so minor. She realizes that her own family never even bothered to show her that kind of basic respect. She feels slightly embarrassed because all she did was bring him some water, yet he treated the small gesture with so much gratitude. Our girl realizes that being around this man means she is going to experience a lot of things for the very first time. She follows closely behind him while her mind keeps racing back to the moment they first shared a kiss and touched lips. Even though she feels incredibly embarrassed about their connection, she cannot help but wonder if he has ever kissed other women before. She cannot help but wonder if other women in his past felt this same intense connection that she feels right now. The thought of him being with someone else makes her heart ache with a strange and painful jealousy. Inside the house, Ho-yi is already hard at work cleaning and preparing some meat for their next meal. Lizzie thinks it is really strange because usually the women are the ones who handle this kind of work in her world. Our boy just keeps going, as if this is something he is naturally supposed to do without even thinking about it. She just stands there staring at him, completely confused by how different he is from every other man she knows. The atmosphere gets heavy. As she approaches him, her heart beating like a drum against her ribs. She keeps her eyes tightly shut and waits for the moment that she is certain is about to happen. Ho-yi leans in even closer, and the tension between them reaches a breaking point as they prepare to kiss. But our boy catches her by surprise and plants a gentle kiss right on her forehead instead of her lips. She snaps at him and calls him a total idiot for teasing her, while her face turns bright red from the embarrassment. Our boy just stands there looking confused while she tries to hide her blushing face from his sight. She is freaking out internally and wondering if she looked like someone who was just begging for a kiss on the lips. Ho-yi moves closer again and gives her a look that says he knows exactly what is going on in her head. This time, Lizzie makes a silent promise to herself that she will keep her eyes wide open so there is no misunderstanding. They finally lock lips for a real kiss, and the world around them seems to vanish for a few seconds. Our boy pulls back with a small smile while Lizzie stares at him with her heart still racing fast. After their intimate moment, Ho-yi picks up the bucket and heads back to work while Lizzie stands there trying to process what just happened. Lizzie is absolutely horrified when she realizes that Dorothy was watching, and she starts to panic about what the kids saw. Lizzie loses her cool and bolts out of the house as fast as her legs can carry her. Ho-yi and the little girl follow her into the woods as she keeps walking ahead to avoid looking at either of them. Ho-yi stands there with a warm and happy smile on his face while he watches her run off. He looks down at Dorothy and asks her what is wrong with a very gentle and caring expression on his face. He stops to thank the little girl for helping him with the heavy load and treats her with more kindness than she ever expected. Dorothy is absolutely glowing with happiness, and she gives a huge smile as she feels useful and appreciated. Later on, Lizzie starts carefully brushing through a massive piece of dark animal fur to make sure it dries out properly. Ho-yi sits nearby and wonders why she is drying that smelly thing inside the house instead of taking it outdoors. Our boy suddenly has a realization as he watches Lizzie care for the dark fur with such devotion. He realizes that this wolf skin is a highly precious item to her and watches as she handles the pelt with extreme care and affection. Lizzie and the little girl were absolutely fascinated by the giant wolf pelt they found. It was like they had never seen something so fluffy and massive in their entire lives. The little girl reaches out to pet the soft fur of the animal, while Lizzie watches her with a warm and gentle smile. The house was finally filled with laughter and some genuine warmth as they played together. Seeing them so happy made all the life and death struggles outside feel a million miles away. Our boy Lee Ho-yi stood back and just soaked in the wholesome vibes for a moment. He knew he was the one who had to protect this peace no matter what happened next. Life in the mountains was tough, but they were making the best of it together. The cabin stood quiet against the backdrop of the massive green peaks surrounding their little sanctuary. Lizzie was busy prepping some massive steaks in the kitchen with practiced ease. She was handling the raw meat with the kind of skill you only get from years of survival. He watches her work intently and realizes that keeping a house running takes a lot of effort and knowledge. She explains that pickling the meat is the smartest way to make sure they do not waste a single bite. Seeing her face light up at the extra fat he saved from the hunt makes all that tedious work worthwhile. He feels a massive surge of pride knowing his careful skinning technique actually made her life a lot easier. Our protagonist looked on with a serious expression as he realized he had a lot more to learn about this world. Strength alone was not going to be enough to keep everyone fed and happy. He knew he needed to master the local economy and trade as soon as possible. Understanding what counts as wealth and how to exchange goods was the next big hurdle in his journey. Lee Ho-yi decides it is time to get back to work and stands up with a brand new sense of purpose. He still has plenty of chores to finish and knows the daylight will not last forever. Lizzie jumped up in surprise because she did not expect him to head for the door so suddenly. She wondered if she had said something wrong or if he was just restless again. She asked if he wanted her to stay seated while he went out to handle the heavy lifting. Her concern for his well-being was starting to show in every little question she asked. Our boy just gave a confident wave and told her she had absolutely nothing to worry about. He had a plan, and he was not about to let a little physical labor slow him down. He gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder and promised to stay safe while he was out. The height difference between them was huge, but the respect they had for each other was even bigger. With his gear ready, he headed out into the wilderness alone to get some much-needed practice. Lizzie watched him go with a lingering look of worry in her eyes. He found a thick patch of trees that looked like the perfect place for some logging practice. Standing among the giants of the forest, he felt small but determined to prove his worth as a provider. Even though he did not know a thing about wood types, he trusted his raw power to get the job done. He stared at his reflection in the axe blade and prepared himself for the hard work ahead. Our boy put his entire back into it and unleashed a massive swing that whistled through the air. The force he generated was enough to make the very ground beneath him tremble with the impact. But instead of a clean cut, the handle just could not take the insane pressure he was putting on it. He felt the wood splinter in his hands as the vibration traveled all the way up his arms. He stood there in total shock as the axe head went flying into the distance like a rocket. It turns out that being too strong for your own tools is a real problem in this world. Talk about a major fail for our supposedly overpowered protagonist as he stared at the broken handle. He looked completely embarrassed by his own lack of control over his ridiculous strength. By the time he headed back to the cabin, the sun was already starting its slow descent over the mountains. The day had not gone exactly as planned, but he was not coming home empty-handed. He returned home lugging a basket full of firewood to show for his long hours of effort. Even with a broken axe, he managed to gather enough to keep the hearth burning through the night. Lizzie and the kid were waiting by the door looking totally worried when they saw him walking back. They had been counting the minutes since he left, and were relieved to see him in one piece. Before he could even say a word, Lizzie rushed over and grabbed him by the hand. She did not care about the wood he brought back, she just wanted to make sure he was okay. She forced our boy to sit down right then and there on the floor of the cabin. He was so surprised by her assertiveness that he did not even think to resist her. Our girl started tenderly wiping the sweat and dirt off his face with a clean cloth. He looked slightly embarrassed by all the attention, but he secretly enjoyed the care she was showing him. The little girl watches the two of them with wide eyes, as if she is witnessing the most important lesson about love. Ho-yi just smiles back at her while basking in the cozy warmth of their small family circle. Suddenly, the tiny one turned around and bolted toward the water bucket with a look of pure determination. She wanted to help take care of their hero just as much as Lizzie did. She was determined to help and dunked her own small cloth into the cold water with a splash. Her tiny hands were shaking with excitement as she prepared to join in the grooming process. Without a care for the mess, she ran back across the room, leaving wet footprints everywhere. She was on a mission, and a little spilled water was not going to stop her progress. She literally lunged at Lee Ho-yi to help clean him up with her soaking wet rag. He was totally shocked by the sudden splash of cold water, but he could not stop himself from laughing. Our boy was totally caught off guard by the sudden wet attack and the kid's pure enthusiasm. He just sat there sweating and laughing while the two of them worked together to clean him up. Lizzie could not help but laugh out loud as their little makeshift family grew closer than ever before. In that moment, Lee Ho-yi knew that every struggle he faced was worth it for this smile. Dorothy looks up with big sparkling eyes and a tiny smile that could melt even the coldest heart in existence. Ho-yi is clearly under her spell as he looks down at the little girl with nothing but pure adoration. He gently pats her head and thanks her for being such a good kid. This is the peak wholesome content we all needed today, seeing our boy embrace his role as a doting father. The little one just giggles and zooms off toward the kitchen with more energy than a boss monster. Ho-yi and Lizzie can only watch her go, completely enamored with that chaotic toddler energy. Honestly, this family dynamic is just pure goals right now. Our protagonist and his wife are basically just sitting there laughing together at the sheer joy of their domestic life. Their bright smiles prove that after all the struggle and pain he went through, finding this kind of peace feels like a massive win for everyone. Outside, the little cabin sits tucked away in the lush forest, looking like something straight out of a fairy tale. Life is quiet, simple, and perfect for once in this secluded mountain hideout. Smoke drifts lazily from the stone chimney into the cool evening air. It is the kind of peaceful atmosphere that makes you forget all the monsters and deadly levels for a second. Dinner time rolls around, but the tiny terror has already tapped out for the night. Dorothy is fast asleep on a cushion while her parents finally get a quiet moment to share a meal. Ho-yi and Lizzie share a look across the table, probably thinking about how lucky they are to have this life. The silence is actually a nice change of pace after a long day. Dorothy is out like a light, dreaming about whatever toddlers dream about. She looks so peaceful that you almost forget how much energy she was burning just a few minutes ago. Our boy and Lizzie share a quiet laugh over their meal as the tension of the day fades away. It is these small, quiet moments that really show how deep their bond has grown over time. Eventually, it is time to move the little one to her actual bed before she gets a stiff neck. Ho-yi moves in with expert dad precision and scoops her up without even waking her. Ho-yi holds his daughter close and prepares to take her to bed, while Lizzie begins cleaning up the dishes from their dinner. The peaceful routine of their family life feels more natural with every passing day. He carries her over to the warm spot by the hearth where the fire is crackling low. The golden glow fills the room, making everything feel incredibly cozy and safe. Our protagonist carefully tucks his daughter into her bed and makes sure she is snug and warm under the covers. You can tell by the way he lingers that he would do absolutely anything to protect this peace. Night falls over the mountain, and the only light left is the warm flicker of a candle from inside their home. The world outside is dark and still as the forest goes to sleep. Back in the kitchen, Lizzie is finishing up some late chores by dipping a cloth into a pot of steaming water. Even though the day is over, she is still looking after the household. Ho-Yi walks up behind her. His foot steps quiet on the wooden floor as the house settles for the night. A different kind of tension building in the air now that they are finally alone. He reaches out and gently takes her hand, stopping her from working any longer. It is a simple gesture, but it carries so much weight in the silence of their dark house. The two of them lock eyes in the dim light as a deep blush begins to creep up on both of their faces. Lizzie is clearly caught off guard by his sudden move and can only stare back at him in silent confusion. They stand there in each other's arms, framed by the window of their cozy little cabin. It is the perfect ending to a day spent building their own little piece of heaven away from the world. A girl looks up at Lee Ho-Yi with eyes full of love and a face turning beet red. She is completely swept up in the moment as they stand close together. Her hand reaches up and gently brushes against the back of his neck, while the tension between them reaches a boiling point. This is the big moment, everyone. She reminds herself that she shouldn't be shy, because this is exactly how a devoted wife is supposed to behave with her husband. With a shaky breath, she reaches out and slides her hand under his tunic, feeling the warmth of his skin. Our boy Lee Ho-Yi just stands there letting her take the lead. Her heart races as she finally makes a move and slides her hand directly against his warm skin to feel how solid he really is. Our protagonist gives her this soft, knowing smile that would make anyone melt on the spot. He is totally cool and collected, which only makes her even more flustered. She suddenly loses her nerve and turns away, hiding her face because the embarrassment is just too much to handle. She is thinking to herself that she is still so incredibly shy. He immediately catches her hand to stop her from running away and pulls her back in for a much closer look. He leans in close to her ear and whispers something that makes her breath hitch as his shadow looms over her. She is completely frozen in place by his intense presence. The two of them walk hand in hand through a dark doorway, leaving the rest of the world behind them. It is finally time for some privacy and a little peace and quiet. They tumble onto the bed together while the lantern light flickers against the wall, and the reality of the night finally begins to set in. He hovers directly over her with an intense gaze that makes her entire world feel like it is caught on fire. She reaches out to touch his face as her long hair spills across the pillow, and she looks at him with pure devotion. The world outside simply does not exist for her in this moment. She lets out a shaky breath as her face turns bright red from the pure anticipation of what is about to happen next. She closes her eyes tightly as she lets go of all her fears and focuses entirely on the feeling of being close to him. Her inner world is filled with nothing but his presence. They finally share a passionate kiss on the bed while the lantern light glows softly beside them. It is a moment of pure bliss for our girl as she holds him close. She looks at her daughter sleeping peacefully and offers a silent prayer that the happiness she has found with her husband and child will last forever. She relives a nightmare where a man dressed as Santa stands before her, while she desperately begs him not to take her family away. She thinks about how rich people in big mansions with many rooms and butlers probably would not understand the kind of life she had to endure. To them, her suffering is just a foreign concept. She remembers how every poor child grew up forced to share the exact same tiny sleeping space with their parents, without any privacy at all. Her younger self clutches the thin blanket and sobs quietly in the dark, wishing for a life that was not filled with so much fear. Her heart is breaking even as a child. The memories of her childhood are filled with the echo of cruel voices and terrifying threats that still haunt her to this very day. A terrifying shadow of a man looms over her as she trembles under the covers, trying to make herself as small as possible. The fear is palpable as she hides from the world. She stayed awake shivering until the break of dawn while her little brother slept beside her through the nightmare. It was a long and lonely struggle for survival every night. She used to wonder if she would ever find peace, or if she was destined to live a life filled with constant sobbing, just like her mother. The crackling sound of a fire starts to bleed into the darkness of her memories as she begins to wake up from the nightmare. The past is finally starting to fade away. Her eyes slowly flutter open as the dark memories of her childhood begin to dissolve into the comforting reality of her new life. The comforting sound of firewood crackling in the hearth is what finally woke her up. She realizes that the cold, dark room from her dream is nowhere to be found. She is completely stunned to wake up in a massive bed beside her husband, after clearly remembering that she fell asleep on the hard floor. Lying in such a soft and warm bed feels like a total dream compared to the miserable and cold nights she survived in the past. The little blonde girl is fast asleep and hugging her arm, which brings a peaceful smile to our girl's face. This is the family she always dreamed of having. She feels a massive sense of relief as she realizes the nights she knew before were never this sweet. The fear and the cold are finally gone for good. She realizes that her entire world started changing for the better the very moment this incredible man stepped into her life to protect her. Lee Ho-yi starts to wake up and looks at her with sleepy eyes as he notices her staring at him. He gives her a look that says he knows exactly what she is thinking. He pulls her and the child into a warm embrace as they all snuggle together under the blankets for a little longer. This is the peaceful life she never thought she would have. Our boy wakes up in the most peaceful way possible with his wife and child by his side under the warm blankets. Lizzie cannot help but smile because her heart feels all tingly just being near him in these quiet morning moments. This is the quiet and happy life Ho-yi never thought he would have after everything he went through in the past. He slowly opens his eyes to the morning sun and smiles at the sight of his daughter sleeping peacefully right next to him. Carefully as he slips out of bed to avoid waking the little one up while she sleeps so soundly. Before leaving, he gives her hair a gentle stroke as she mumbles happily in her sleep. She is definitely the light of his life in this new world, and he will do anything to keep her safe from harm. He finds Lizzie already up and busy in the kitchen area of their small but cozy home. Without saying a word, he reaches out and grabs the heavy bucket she was about to lift with her hands. Our girl is totally caught off guard by his sudden help, and she looks up at him with wide eyes. He just gives her that signature calm smile of his that always makes her heart flutter with every look. He gets right to work pouring the water with a level of focus that makes a simple chore look incredibly cool. Even a mundane task like this becomes impressive when he puts his mind to it. He turns his gaze back toward her with an expression that says he is definitely up to something playful. Lizzie looks completely flustered as she wonders what could be on his mind during this early morning work. He asks her well, which only makes her blush deepen as she tries to hide her face from him. The tension between these two is just adorable and full of love as they go about their day together. Ho-yi begins to wonder if his playful words were a bit too effective. He realizes that the way he addresses her has a massive impact on her mood for the rest of the day. Our boy is thinking to himself about all those sweet titles like honey or wife. He realizes that even after all this time, he can still make her heart skip a beat with just a few words. He leans in and asks what about Lizzie, as he continues to tease her with that playful grin on his face. He is definitely enjoying how easily he can get a reaction out of his wife this morning. Watching her get this flustered is clearly the best part of his morning so far. He keeps teasing her about those sweet nicknames until she is completely overwhelmed by her own shyness. Ho-yi just laughs while she remains completely mortified by his playful teasing. They really are the perfect match for this cozy life. Our boy decides to give his wife a break and prepares to head out with a satisfied smirk on his face. He is clearly loving every second of this peaceful domestic life they have built together. He gives her a quick poke in the back, just to see her jump and react to his touch. Meanwhile, the little princess finally wakes up with a big yawn and a stretch in the middle of the bed. She must have been having the best dream ever because she was imagining a giant piece of flying meat with wings. Even in her sleep, this kid has her priorities straight when it comes to good food. The little girl is still half asleep and looks completely dazed while she tries to process the fact that her wonderful dream is over. She is probably still thinking about that massive feast she was just eating. Finally, she decides it is time to move and begins crawling across the floor with serious determination in her eyes. The second she spots her parents, she charges toward them across the room with her tiny arms wide open. It is the kind of pure energy that only a happy kid can have first thing in the morning. Both Ho-yi and Lizzie light up with joy the moment they see her running their way like a little professional athlete. She is a tiny bolt of lightning moving across the wooden floor to greet them. Her eyes start sparkling with excitement the moment she sees the potential for some delicious food. Whatever is waiting for her in that bucket must be the most amazing thing in the world. She is so excited for breakfast that she starts trying to climb right into the wooden barrel. Her parents can only watch and laugh as their daughter creates her own little morning adventure. Our protagonist cannot help but burst out laughing at how much energy she has so early in the morning. She dives headfirst into the container while shouting for meat with everything she has in her tiny lungs. Ho-yi lets out a hearty laugh, because his family is just the best thing that ever happened to him in any life. Later, our protagonist heads out into the deep woods and tells himself he is ready for any wolf that comes his way. He is not the same man he used to be, and he has a family to protect now. He brings out a heavy axe and looks at the sharp blade with a very serious expression on his face. It might be a simple tool, but in his hands, it is a deadly and reliable weapon for hunting. His boots crunch through the thick grass as he moves deeper into the forest to find some game. Ho-yi suddenly stops and looks into the shadows with a dangerous gaze. Something is out there, and the peaceful atmosphere is about to shift as he prepares for an encounter. He stands in the middle of the woods, feeling a weight in the air that makes his skin crawl. He wonders why the atmosphere has become so heavy while he was just out here trying to hunt. He tightens his grip on the handle as the pressure continues to build. Even though he is in a vast forest, he feels like he is suffocating. Our protagonist locks his gaze on the shadows and wonders what kind of nightmare is about to crawl out of the dark. He is mentally preparing himself for a fight against a monstrous beast. A pair of boots crunches through the undergrowth, stalking toward our protagonist. Ho-yi stands his ground, knowing he is being watched. Something catches him off guard, and his eyes widen as he tries to process what he is actually seeing. A mysterious figure in a dark cloak slowly approaches him with a steady and calm pace. This man does not look like a monster, but the presence he carries is enough to put anyone on edge. The man stops and reveals a weathered face with a sharp gaze that looks through Lee Ho-yi. He is a seasoned warrior. Ho-yi can feel the sweat start to drip as he stares back at the newcomer and wonders who this powerful old man could be. The tension between them remains thick as they face off in the woods. The bloody remains scattered across the forest floor prove that a violent struggle recently took place against a massive and dangerous beast. This veteran hunter immediately recognizes the obvious tracks and realizes a colossal creature must have passed through the area very recently. He initially assumed our boy had someone helping him along the way. But the more he looks, the more he realizes that Lee Ho-yi is actually out here all by himself. After watching the mountain hut for several days, the old man concludes that our protagonist is just a regular guy who lacks basic combat skills. The veteran confidently steps out from the shadows to finally confront the young man and make his presence known in the forest clearing. The old man mocks the situation internally because he thinks he is dealing with a complete amateur who barely knows what he is doing. He suddenly abandons his playful attitude and focuses his full attention on assessing the young warrior standing right in front of him. A strange feeling of unease washes over the veteran as he begins to notice something completely unexpected about this mysterious mountain dweller. Lee Ho-yi stands his ground with an axe in hand, sensing someone approaching from behind. The old man walks calmly into the clearing, his shadow stretching long across the purple-tinted grass. The old man closely inspects the stranger to see if he truly possesses the talent required to survive the upcoming trials. His eyes lock onto our boy's arm, where several dark marks are clearly visible against his skin. This discovery seems to catch him off guard, and he cannot help but mutter his surprise out loud. He easily identifies the marks as wolf bites, but remains baffled by how the wounds managed to heal over so perfectly and quickly. He knows that such a deep injury should have shredded the muscles and rendered the boy completely unable to move his arm at all. The old man starts to wonder if this kid is actually a legendary mage capable of using mystical powers to ignore fatal physical damage. Our boy feels the weight of the intense gaze as the old man realizes that this discovery changes everything for both of them. A sinister realization hits the old man because he finally sees a way to turn this chance meeting into his ultimate life-changing opportunity. This encounter gives the veteran hunter a renewed sense of hope, for the vengeance he believed was impossible to achieve before he died. Li Ho-yi narrows his eyes, sensing the sudden change in the old man's demeanor. He isn't sure what this guy is thinking, but he knows he needs to stay on his guard. He begins to tell the story of his youth, when he was still a vigorous warrior, who fearlessly wielded a massive spear in battle. In his old life, every forest keeper serving a noble was legally forced to spend a grueling portion of their time fighting on the front lines. After leaving his father behind, he spent years wandering from village to village as a sellsword. He traveled light with his spear and a pack, searching for a place to call home among the rugged mountains and rocky paths. Eventually, he found a mountain village that seemed like a paradise, overflowing with abundance and natural beauty. It looked like the perfect place to settle down and escape the horrors of war. Because even commoners could enter the woods, the lack of firewood forced the villagers to travel much deeper into the dangerous mountain terrain. The forest was often covered in a thick mist that hid the terrifying monsters that were waiting to ambush the unsuspecting mountain villagers. His life fell apart when he failed to meet the conditions of an official contract and found himself rejected and broken on the ground. Fear washes over his young face as he stares into the darkness of the woods. He realized too late that he was being hunted by something far worse than anything he had seen on the battlefield. He felt a primal terror while cornered against a tree, as a low growl signaled that his life was about to reach a violent end. Two small, green-skinned creatures with glowing yellow eyes peek out from behind the bark of a tree. They are goblin children, and the old man reveals the horrifying truth that these monsters kidnap human women to breed their offspring. A massive, muscular goblin looms over him, its eyes glowing with a predatory light as it prepares to strike. He later learned that the village where the women kept dying had become infamous throughout the region as the Goblin Village. It was a place of pure nightmare that he could never forget. The name of the Goblin Village eventually became a curse that reminded him every single day of the horrific life he was forced to live. The old man admits through his tears that he was forced to live alongside those disgusting monsters for several decades against his will. His entire existence became focused on a single, burning obsession. He was driven solely by the need to one day have his revenge on the bastards who took everything from him. He swore a blood oath to survive the hellscape until he could personally burn every single one of those goblin nests to the ground. The two men remain silent as the weight of this tragic history fills the clearing and changes the mood of their meeting completely. Our hero silently processes the heartbreaking story, while realizing that his own path is now inextricably linked to this broken old man. He stares at his own battle scars and realizes they are permanent proof of the brutal reality he must face in this new world. He remains calm while understanding that the road ahead will be far more complicated and dangerous than he ever imagined when he started. The veteran declares his intention to train our boy into an elite hunter, so he can finally witness the total destruction of his enemies. Li Ho-yi prepares himself for the grueling journey ahead, while the veteran hunter eyes his new student with a newfound sense of purpose. Our protagonist realizes that once this contract is officially signed, a binding force takes over. He won't be able to just pack up and run away whenever he feels like it anymore. In a show of respect, our boy lowers his head and bows deeply to the man who is now officially his master. It is a humble gesture, but there is still plenty of tension under the surface. The old man is a sharp observer and realizes that his new student is keeping his weight shifted back. He might be smiling, but his guard is up, and he is ready to move at a moment's notice. With an authoritative air, the old man promises that starting today he will pass on every scrap of knowledge he possesses. He places a hand on the boy's shoulder to seal their new training agreement. A cold sweat starts to bead on our boy's forehead. He is realizing just how intense this whole situation is getting, and the path ahead looks steeper than ever before. Morning light spills into the cozy house, and it feels like he only closed his eyes for a split second. Our boy is already up and moving while the woman in the room prepares for the day. He peers out the window before finally stepping out of the house to confront the visitor waiting in the yard. He is being extra cautious about who he lets inside his home while he is gone. Inside the kitchen, the woman named Lizzie is busy cooking up a meal with the little blonde girl Dorothy watching her every move. Our boy thinks to himself that he does not want anyone getting used to coming in here while it is just the two of them staying alone. He steps out to find the old man waiting patiently for him. They lock eyes, and our boy knows it is time to get back to the grind and leave this peaceful atmosphere behind. Seeing that wide grin on the old man's face makes our hero immediately tighten up with suspicion. He knows that in a world this dangerous, someone who smiles that much while surrounded by monsters is bad news. Suddenly our boy sees a vision of a man in a suit asking if Juan has come home yet. It is a weirdly jarring moment as he pulls on his vest trying to keep his focus on reality. He slings his heavy bag over his shoulder and prepares to head out. Just as he is about to leave, someone calls out that name Juan again, making him pause for a second. Our boy turns back to Lizzie and tells her not to worry because he is fine and will be back before they know it. He is trying to act cool, but you can tell he cares about leaving them behind. Lizzie looks incredibly flustered as she clumsily tries her best to finish packing a lunchbox for him. She is clearly worried about him going out there and is doing everything she can to help. Our boy gets a bit of a blush on his face as he watches her. Seeing her work so hard just for his sake is definitely hitting him in the feels more than he wants to admit. Little Dorothy stands nearby watching Lizzie with a confused and curious expression. The atmosphere in the house is thick with a mix of worry and affection as our boy prepares to depart. Suddenly, Dorothy turns around and starts sprinting toward the door. She is moving fast with a look of pure determination on her tiny face as she chases after our protagonist. Little Dorothy comes charging toward the door with a look of pure focus on her face. Our hero is totally startled by her sudden burst of energy and shouts out her name in confusion. Dorothy is not letting him leave without the most important thing. She shouts about the lunchbox, reminding him that he cannot go out into the world on an empty stomach. Lizzie rushes up right behind her and shoves the lunch into his bag, telling him he needs to hurry. She is frantic and insists that he makes sure to eat properly while he is out training. Our boy looks back over his shoulder with a soft smile on his face. He realizes that having a family that actually looks after him and cares about his well-being is honestly a wonderful feeling. Lizzie stands there looking a bit shy and hesitant. Our boy thinks to himself that this is probably just her subtle way of telling him to make sure he comes back home safely to them. He decides to tease her a little bit and asks her directly if she is telling him to come back safely. He points a finger toward her with a playful grin, enjoying the moment. Lizzie gives him a sweet and honest nod of confirmation. She is not hiding it anymore, and the look on her face is pure sincerity as she watches him go. She waves goodbye with a bright smile on her face. In the foreground, Dorothy is still pointing and making sure he knows that the food is the top priority for his trip. The little blonde girl lets out one last giant shout for him to come back safely. Her energy is infectious, and our boy can feel his heart melting just a little bit at how much she cares. Our boy waves back at her with a huge, genuine smile plastered on his face. He promises her out loud that he will definitely return, and you can tell he means it from the bottom of his heart. As he walks away, he starts to feel a bit of regret. He thinks to himself that this is actually bad because for the first time he really does not want to leave his home at all. His expression sharpens as he focuses his gaze forward. Even though his heart is back at the house, he knows he has a job to do and a training session to survive. Lizzie and Dorothy keep waving as he gets further away. Our boy thinks they are just way too adorable, and he is incredibly lucky to have stumbled into this sudden family life. The peaceful morning scene fades as he follows the old man deep into the sun-drenched forest. The training is finally about to begin, and the quiet life of the house is left behind. Li Ho-yi is starting to lose his patience. They have been trekking through these woods for a while now, and he is wondering what could possibly be so important that they had to hike this far out. Suddenly, the old man in the green cloak stops dead in his tracks and mutters a phrase in a strange language. This leaves the protagonist standing there completely confused about what is happening. Our boy looks down, wondering if the old man is trying to point something out on the forest floor. Is there a clue hidden in the dirt, or is this just another part of the test? Without another word, the hooded man starts walking again, his heavy cloak swishing through the grass. Lee Ho-yi follows closely behind, trying to figure out what he is missing. As he watches the ground, he notices something that makes his heart skip a beat. Every step the old man takes leaves a massive indentation in the solid earth, as if he weighs 1,000 pounds. Looking at the trail behind them, the evidence is undeniable. That old man is leaving behind footprints that look more like craters than human tracks. This training is clearly on a whole different level than anything our boy has ever experienced before, and he is finally starting to see the power of the man leading him. Lee Ho-yi is mesmerized by the old man's footwork, and wonders if it is some kind of legendary technique like a 1,000-pound step. He decides that if he wants to master this skill, he needs to watch every single movement and copy the master exactly. He tries to mirror those steps as they trek through the forest, but quickly realizes it is much harder than the old man makes it look. The old hunter looks back with a knowing smirk, because he can tell exactly what his new student is trying to do. They continue deeper into the quiet woods, while Lee Ho-yi follows closely behind like a shadow waiting for the next part of his training. The mentor stops by a tree and instructs him to touch the bark to learn the subtle differences between the trees on different slopes. Next thing you know, our boy is down on all fours feeling the grass and the dirt under the guidance of his mentor. He is drilling these sensations into his brain until he can remember them in his sleep, because every detail matters out here. They reach a rocky clearing to take a quick breather, while the old man starts searching through his gear for a specific tool. The old man reaches into his waist pouch with practiced movements, while our protagonist watches closely so he doesn't miss a single secret. He pulls a small wooden tool out of the bag and holds it with the confidence of someone who has used it 1,000 times before. The old man senses something that Ho-yi completely missed and immediately puts a whistle to his mouth to signal a change in the atmosphere. Lee Ho-yi is beyond hyped to finally dig into the delicious lunch that Lizzie worked so hard to prepare for him today. The smell of the meat and perfectly cooked egg is absolutely amazing, and his mouth is watering before he even takes a bite. The old man starts gesturing toward our boy to warn him that bringing a human-made meal into the wild was a massive mistake. The mentor shakes his head to signal that their lunch break must wait, because a far more important and dangerous situation requires their immediate attention. Our boy realizes that the scent of a packed meal made by a human is completely different from the natural air of the mountains. That delicious scent will spread across the entire mountain in no time and basically act as a dinner bell for every predator in the area. He looks totally heartbroken as he has to pack his meal back up without taking a single bite, since it's too dangerous to eat here. They eventually reach a secluded cabin in the woods, and our protagonist realizes this humble little hut is going to be his new home. Inside the cabin, the master picks up 2 long wooden poles, and Lee Ho-yi stands there confused because they appear to be simple sticks instead of powerful weapons. Lee Ho-yi rubs his chin and tries to process what he is looking at because he has never seen weapons like these. He is feeling a bit skeptical about how effective a straight piece of wood can really be in a fight. He looks at the straight piece of wood and wonders how he is supposed to shoot an arrow with something that has no curve at all. The mentor hands him one of the bows, and our boy is shocked by how rigid and heavy the wood feels in his hands. As they head back outside, our boy watches the old man walk and realizes it is going to take a ridiculous amount of strength to draw a bow that big. The old hunter raises the bow toward the sky and prepares to show him how it is actually done with a masterly display of skill. The old man draws the bow back with incredible grace, and his movements are so smooth it feels like time itself has stopped. The arrow whistles through the air with terrifying speed as it homes in on the target. This shot carries so much force that it looks like it could punch through anything in its path. With a massive explosion of splinters, the arrow slams into the distant tree trunk and sinks deep into the wood. The impact is so heavy that it looks like it could have pierced right through a solid stone wall. Our boy just stands there staring at the incredible damage and realizes the true power of the technique. Ho-yi's jaw is literally on the floor after seeing that arrow embed itself deep in the tree trunk. He finally gets it and understands exactly how you are supposed to shoot with a bow that looks like a simple pole. Now it is finally our boy's turn to step up and give it a shot, but the string is much harder to pull than he expected. The old man steps in to help him out and adjusts his arm and posture with a calm and guiding hand. He is making sure Ho-Yi has the right foundation before he even attempts to release the arrow. He is sweating and his arms are shaking from the effort, but he refuses to give up while his mentor guides his form. He takes a deep breath and tells himself he needs to focus on his target and block out the pain in his muscles. This isn't just about raw strength, it is about having the mental discipline to control the weapon. As the training day ends, our boy reflects on all the new words he learned and the complex movements required to survive as a hunter. Even after all that progress, Lee Ho-Yi isn't satisfied and vows to push himself even harder. He knows he needs to master these complex movements until they become second nature during a real fight. Our protagonist Lee Ho-Yi is out here showing off his elite archery skills. He draws back his heavy bow with perfect form while his companion watches every move in total silence. You can tell he has been practicing non-stop to reach this level of precision. Look at that focus in his eyes. Our boy is not playing games today. Every single shot is calculated to make sure they do not go hungry tonight, and he is locked in on his target like a true predator. Back at the rustic wooden hut, things are finally starting to look peaceful. This place used to be a mess, but now it feels like a real home with plenty of firewood stacked up and ready for the cold nights ahead. The little blonde girl lounges on the bed and thinks about Juwon's black hair while the meat she ate helps her grow stronger. A quiet moment passes as she enjoys the rare feeling of being completely safe. The world outside might be dangerous, but inside these wooden walls, everything feels just right for the first time in a long while. She sits up with a big happy smile on her face because life is so much better with a full stomach and a reliable person looking out for her. Our little girl is finally starting to feel like she can actually enjoy a peaceful life. Across the room, she spots Lizzie kneeling down and working. The whole atmosphere in the house has completely shifted for the better since Lee Ho-Yi arrived and changed their lives for the good. Lizzie watches the little girl play happily on the bed, and she cannot help but smile at the sweet sight. She reflects on how miserable their lives used to be before our hero arrived to bring some joy back into the house. Hearing the little girl laugh like this makes Lizzie feel all warm and fuzzy inside as she works. It is a feeling she compares to sitting right by a cozy fire on a freezing cold night while she thinks about her good fortune. Our little girl is already looking forward to her next meal. She is literally hoping the food in her stomach digests faster just so she can go back and eat even more of that amazing hunt. She giggles to herself while rolling around on the bed in a state of pure bliss. This kind of genuine joy is exactly what she needed after all the hardship they went through, and it is honestly heartwarming to see her so happy. While being carried safely in his arms, the little girl starts putting the pieces together about the relationship between the two adults. She realizes that if this man is actually the husband in this house, then he must be her new father figure. A big question starts to form in her young mind as she stares into the darkness while trying to sleep. If this man is truly Lizzie's husband, then she wonders what exactly that makes him to her, and if he will be a kind parent. The weight of this sudden realization hits the poor girl so hard that her eyes immediately well up with massive tears. She looks completely overwhelmed by the thought of finally having someone reliable and strong to look after her and her mother. Suddenly, the girl snaps out of her daydream as her surroundings start to change into something much more ominous. The warmth of the memory begins to fade away into a cold and dark reality as she wakes up with a confused expression. She looks around the empty bed and realizes she is all alone in the room with nobody to protect her. The house is quiet, and the cozy feeling from before has been replaced by a chilling silence that makes her heart sink into her stomach. A dark and heavy feeling settles in her chest as she realizes that things are definitely not okay. The purple aura around the scene suggests that some bad memories are starting to resurface and haunt her while she tries to find her mother. We get a glimpse into a much darker part of her past through a red text overlay. Cruel voice grumbles about how she should have been born a boy so she could at least work instead of just eating all the time. A total monster looms over her like a dark shadow in the middle of the night while she trembles. He sees her as nothing more than a burden, and her heart is pounding out of her chest as she looks up at his terrifying and cold silhouette. Panicked and scared, the girl rushes through the house as fast as her little legs can carry her. She needs to check on their supplies and make sure that the progress they made with the hero has not been snatched away from them. She reaches for the large wooden barrel where they keep the meat to make sure everything is still there. Her hands are shaking as she tries to confirm they still have their food because her entire sense of stability is tied to these supplies. A loud and aggressive shout echoes through the walls and startles her as she stands by the barrel. Someone is outside demanding that they stop lying to them, and the voice sounds incredibly dangerous and full of malice. The poor girl freezes in place with a terrified expression as she listens to the intruders screaming outside. That harsh tone brings back every single nightmare she has ever had, and she trembles while praying that the bad men do not find her. She slowly edges toward a gap in the wooden wall to peek outside and see who is causing the commotion. Her eyes go wide as she sees who is standing in their yard, and it is someone she knows very well for the worst reasons. 3 guys are standing out there, and they definitely did not come over for a friendly visit in the middle of the night. They are armed with tools and looking for a fight while the lead thug looks ready to tear the whole place apart. These are the same bastards who used to come around to beat up and threaten her father in the past. She remembers it clearly and knows that whenever they left, her father would just take out all his anger on her instead. Now she is absolutely terrified for Lizzie, who is out there facing these monsters all by herself. She watches from the dark shadows, wondering if her mother is going to be okay against these violent men who have no mercy. The blonde thug grabs Lizzie by the shoulder and starts interrogating her with a nasty and threatening grin. He is accusing her of being a thief and demands to know where a poor woman like her got such high-quality goods. Lizzie cries out that she did not steal anything and that her husband was the one who hunted it. But the thug just leans in closer and mocks her. He thinks she is spouting nonsense and is not buying her story for 1 second. Another thug with red hair steps in looking even more aggressive than the leader of the pack. They are surrounding her and making it clear that they are in charge now, while Lizzie looks completely helpless against their overwhelming strength. Tears stream down Lizzie's face as she desperately tries to get the intruders to believe her story about the hero. She is terrified of what these men will do if they find out about the treasure the man brought back for them. The lead thug loses his patience and shouts for her to be quiet before shoving her violently to the ground. He has no respect for her and is ready to start raiding the house for whatever valuables he thinks she is hiding. The trio of thugs barge right into the house and start looking for any loot they can sell for a profit. It does not take them very long to find the prize they were searching for, and they stop in their tracks with greedy eyes. Their eyes practically turn into dollar signs when they see the massive wolf hide that the hero hunted earlier. This thing is absolutely huge, and the quality of the fur is unlike anything these common thugs have ever seen in their lives. The leader can barely contain his greed as he feels the thick fur of the hide and thinks about the money. He tells his crew that this thing is worth a massive amount, and they can sell it for a fortune in the city. The goons are tearing the place apart, shouting for the others to search every single corner. They are looking for something valuable, and they do not care who they trample to get it. A massive wolf skin lies on the floor, which is exactly what those greedy idiots want. They are moving fast, determined to find every last bit of loot in this house. Hidden under the table, the small girl trembles as she watches the heavy boots of the intruders march right past her. She is desperately trying to stay silent, so they do not notice her cowering right under their feet while they rob her. Her heart is pounding so hard it feels like it might jump out of her chest as the men move through the house. She clutches her dress in pure terror while praying that these men leave without finding her hiding spot under the furniture. Suddenly, someone moves into action with incredible speed to protect their home and livelihood. A figure with long brown hair rushes toward the commotion and refuses to let these criminals take another step further into their house without a fight. Lizzie jumps right in front of the precious wolf hide and spreads her arms wide to block the thieves from taking it. Even with tears streaming down her face, she finds the courage to stand her ground and tell them the hide belongs to her family. These 3 thugs corner poor Lizzie and mock her, because she used to be way too scared to even make a sound when they were around. One of the bullies just strikes her across the face without a second thought. It is disgusting how they treat her, and they are actually laughing while she suffers on the floor. She hits the ground hard as the impact of the blow sends her reeling. These guys really have no shame at all, and they are enjoying her pain. Our girl is clutching her face in pain while trying to process what just happened. She can barely even make a sound after that brutal hit. Little Dorothy is watching the whole thing from the shadows, and she is completely terrified. This poor kid is seeing things no child should ever have to witness. Lizzie is left in a state of total despair, her tear-filled eyes reflecting the agony of being humiliated and treated like trash by her tormentors. She looks away with an expression of pure defeat and sorrow. It is like her spirit is just breaking right there on the wooden floor of her home. Dorothy is frozen in place, and her eyes are wide with shock. She wants to help her sister, but she is just too small and scared to move. She admits to herself that she just pretended not to know what was happening. That kind of guilt is incredibly heavy for a little kid to carry around. Little Dorothy is sobbing on the floor and calling herself a bad child for just hiding. She feels like she is failing the person she loves most in the world. The blonde bully keeps taunting her and asking if her life is actually worth living now. He is basically telling her that her new husband cannot save her from their cruelty. These idiots think they are safe because they assume the husband does not speak their language. They have no idea how wrong they are or what is coming for them. Lizzie is kneeling there surrounded by their boots, and she looks so small and vulnerable. The atmosphere in the room is getting more dangerous by the second. They grab her by the arm and start dragging her away like she is just some object. She is crying out for help, but the bullies do not care. She tries to pull back, but the blonde guy has an iron grip on her wrist. He looks at her with such cold eyes it is honestly chilling to watch. He yanks her forward and begins to lead her out of the house. This is definitely not going to end well if someone does not step in soon. They drag her right out the door while the other guys just watch and snicker. They are even joking about how they hope nothing bad happens, which is just sick. Dorothy is crawling out from her hiding spot with her tiny hands trembling on the wooden floor. She cannot just stay hidden while her sister is in danger. She watches them disappear into the distance, and her heart just sinks into her chest. She knows in her gut that something terrible is about to happen to her sister. The little girl takes off running as fast as her legs can carry her. She is crying out in desperation, and the fear in her eyes is absolutely heartbreaking. She looks back over her shoulder one last time, but the house is already behind her. She is heading straight for the only person who can actually help. Dorothy just loses it and starts wailing at the top of her lungs. Her screams echo through the area as she searches for any sign of a savior. She is calling out for Juin and begging him to come and save them. She is standing there all alone and looking so lost in the middle of everything. Juin reflects on his long day, while a terrifying vision of his family being dragged away flashes through his mind. Suddenly our boy stops dead in his tracks. He hears something in the distance, and his instincts are screaming at him that something is very wrong. The older guy in the cloak looks back at him and wonders why he stopped so suddenly. Lee Ho-yi is already focused on the distant sound of Dorothy crying. Our protagonist shifts his stance and prepares to move with a very serious look on his face. He knows that cry anywhere, and it definitely means trouble. His face goes pale as he realizes the gravity of the situation. He knows Dorothy would never cry like that unless things were going south at home. He looks back toward the direction of the house with an intense and worried gaze. The realization that his family is in danger hits him like a freight train. He panics and wonders if something happened at home while he was away. His worry for Lizzie and Dorothy is written all over his face right now. Without a second thought, his feet start moving, and he kicks into high gear. He is not just running, he is practically flying through the dense woods. If anything happened to his girls, he is going to make someone pay dearly for it. He sprints through the trees with a level of speed that is terrifying. He finally bursts into the clearing and finds the bullies holding Lizzie against her will. His worst fears are standing right in front of him in the woods. Our boy Lee Ho-yi is absolutely fuming, and he looks like he is about to unleash hell. The rage in his eyes is enough to make anyone run. The bullies turn around and see the literal demon they just summoned. They have no idea that their lives are about to change for the absolute worse. Our boy is not playing around anymore as he launches a brutal strike that connects with the bully's face and sends blood flying everywhere. The impact is massive, and the dude goes down like a sack of bricks, as the other bullies realize they picked a fight with the wrong person. The woman can barely believe her eyes and calls out to him with concern. She's worried about the trouble this might bring, but our boy is way past the point of listening to reason right now. He ignores her entirely and marches toward the next target with cold determination. This is not just a fight anymore. It's a long overdue lesson in consequences for everyone watching. This guy is absolutely terrified and tries to shield himself with his hands, but he knows there is no escaping the monster he helped create. You can see the pure regret written all over his face. Our protagonist delivers a savage knee straight to the chest without hesitating for a second. You can practically hear the ribs cracking as he makes sure this idiot stays down for good this time. The bully collapses in a heap, coughing up blood while the others watch in total horror as he finally pays the terrifying price for his arrogance. Juin calculates his next move even before the blonde bully can land his desperate punch, making the attack look completely useless and slow. He effortlessly slips under the strike and locks the guy into a grapple, making it look like a professional hunter toying with its pathetic prey. Before the guy can even process what is happening, he is hoisted up and slammed toward the dirt. He lets out a pathetic groan as the reality of his situation finally sets in. The impact is thunderous as he hits the ground with enough force to knock the wind out of his lungs and leave him broken on the dirt. He looms over the fallen bully, ready to finish the job with his bare hands. The sheer dominance he is showing right now is honestly terrifying to watch, and nobody is coming to save them. A dark thought crosses his mind as he stares down at the pathetic mess beneath him. The anger is still bubbling just beneath the surface. He thinks to himself that human nature is just filthy and ugly at its core. He knows that if he lets them look down on him even for a single second, it is all over for his peace and quiet. He decides the only way to handle people like this is to engrave fear so deep into their minds that they never cross him again. He wants to make sure these bastards never even think about coming back here again. The blue aura around him is turning cold and oppressive as his killing intent starts to leak out. As he stands among the fallen bodies, the woman watches him from behind, her heart racing at the sight of this new side of him. She is starting to wonder who he really is. She calls out his name again, trying to bring him back to reality before he goes too far and does something he might regret. Her voice is the only thing cutting through his rage. Suddenly, a warning shout rings out as a scythe comes swinging toward him from the shadows. One of them is desperate enough to try a sneak attack from behind. The blonde bully is back for round 2, trying to take him out while his back is turned. What an absolute coward, but he has no idea what he just signed up for. But Li Ho-yi is way ahead of him and catches the guy's wrist in a grip of pure iron. The momentum of the attack is stopped dead in its tracks. He twists the arm with zero hesitation, and the bully lets out a blood-curdling scream that echoes through the trees. That sound is enough to make anyone in the woods turn and run for their lives. Our boy looks like a literal demon right now, his eyes glowing with a terrifying light. He is ready to break more than just an arm if this idiot doesn't start begging for mercy. A hooded old man steps out from the trees and shouts for them to stop before our protagonist completely loses himself to his inner rage. The old man grabs our boy's arm, desperately trying to pull him away from the wounded bully. He is trying to de-escalate the situation before someone actually ends up dead. The old man points toward the house and asks if he can even see how terrified the girl is, finally making Juin pause his brutal assault. The woman stands there trembling, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and genuine fear at the violence she just witnessed. She has never seen this side of him before, and it is a lot to take in. Near the door, a little girl is sobbing her eyes out, completely traumatized by the sight of the man she knew turning into a monster. This was exactly what the old man was worried about. Our boy finally snaps out of his rage and looks back toward them, realizing the impact his actions had on the people he was trying to protect. The guilt starts to settle in almost immediately. The smoke drifts lazily from the chimney as the silence of the woods returns, but the damage to their peace has already been done. Things around here are never going to be the same. She never imagined he was capable of being this frighteningly furious. And the sight of him beating those men reminds her of her late husband. Looking at the men sprawled out on the grass, she admits to herself that, for a moment, she was actually afraid she might be next on his list. The power he showed was just that overwhelming. She realizes they aren't the eyes of a killer, but someone desperately trying to protect her from the trash of the world. Now the look on his face is completely different. He looks like someone who is heartbroken because he thinks she is afraid of him now, and the sadness in his expression is hard to miss. She wonders why the reaction of a worthless woman like her would even matter to a man like him. He has so much power, yet he seems so vulnerable to her opinion of him. Our girl looks absolutely conflicted as she stares at Lee Ho-yi. She can feel her heart racing, yet she cannot figure out why her reaction carries so much weight for a guy this powerful. She realizes this physical reaction is why he thinks she is terrified, and it breaks her heart that he feels so alone right now. She looks up at Lee Ho-yi and just wants to tell him to stop looking so hurt. It is a look no wife ever wants to see on her husband's face, especially when he has done nothing but protect her. She stands there watching him look completely defeated, wishing she could tell him that she isn't actually afraid of him or his power. She decides that actions are going to have to speak louder than words today. Her hand is still trembling as she slowly reaches out toward him, trying to bridge the gap between them and show him she is not running away. She doesn't want this misunderstanding to last any longer, because the sadness in his eyes is just too much for her to handle anymore. Footsteps echo in the quiet space as the distance between them finally disappears. This is the moment where everything changes for this couple, moving past the fear and into something much deeper. Ju-won takes her hands and feels a massive weight lifted off his shoulders the second they finally make contact and look into each other's eyes. It is a sobering reminder of the physical toll he has taken just to ensure she stays safe in this dangerous and unpredictable world. She finally understands that his strength is not something to be feared, but something meant to be her greatest shield against the world. She feels a profound sense of peace wash over her as she realizes that staying by his side is the only place she truly belongs. She finally understands that as long as she is with him, she will be safe from anyone who tries to hurt her. She pulls his hand toward her and gently presses it against her cheek to show him just how much she trusts him now. This silent gesture serves as a promise that she will never leave his side, no matter what happens next. Tears of pure joy and relief stream down her face as she gives him the brightest smile he has ever seen. All the fear and uncertainty have finally vanished, leaving her with the overwhelming realization that she has finally found her sanctuary. Ju-won feels the weight of his recent actions as he contemplates their next move in the middle of the quiet woods. Lizzie finds comfort in the presence of the man who saved her family from a truly desperate situation. The two share an emotional and silent embrace as the adrenaline from their recent battle finally begins to fade away. Ju-won has pushed himself to the limit to ensure their survival, and the physical toll of the fight is clearly visible on him. Ju-won humbles himself by telling her that he is the one who is actually grateful for their presence in his life. Lizzie is completely stunned by his sincerity, because she never expected such kindness from a man with his level of power. Dorothy feels absolutely overwhelmed by the terrifying chaos happening outside, while she waits for someone to come save her. Lizzie suddenly remembers that her daughter is still alone, and directs Ju-won back toward the house with a sense of extreme urgency. She does not waste a single second and sprints back to the house to ensure that the little girl is safe and sound. Lizzie finds the child in a state of shock and immediately tries to provide the emotional support she needs to feel safe again. It breaks Liz's heart to see the child so traumatized, because she knows exactly how terrifying their situation has become lately. Dorothy is desperately hoping for the nightmare to end, as she struggles to process the intense fear currently gripping her heart. The little girl is haunted by the memory of the overwhelming violence she saw when Ju-won fought to protect them from their enemies. She is terrified that she will eventually end up covered in bruises, just like all the other adults she has known in her life. Dorothy realizes she needs to apologize to Lizzie immediately, because she is afraid of being treated like a ghost again by her family. The two of them share a deeply bonding moment as they realize that they are the only family they have left in this world. Dorothy is overcome with emotion and looks up with the hope that she might finally be allowed to live in true peace. Lizzie is left completely bewildered by the child's unexpected question and pulls her close while asking what on earth she is talking about. Lizzie finally allows herself to be vulnerable and shares in the heavy emotions that have been building up throughout this difficult day. The child finds a brief moment of peace in the middle of the chaos, while still trying to process everything that has happened. Then she says something that catches Lizzie completely off guard. She says they are okay because Papa is here, and Lizzie just freezes in place and asks who she is even talking about. Lizzie is genuinely confused and asks the kid if she even knows who Juin really is. To Dorothy, he is not just a protector, he is the father figure she never actually had growing up. Lizzie finds the idea heartwarming and realizes how much the child has come to trust their powerful protector in such a short time. Dorothy is completely serious about her new discovery and does not understand why the adults are finding her realization so amusing. Lizzie is momentarily speechless as she tries to wrap her head around the fact that the child has already chosen a new father figure. Dorothy is filled with a new sense of belonging and declares her intention to the entire world with absolute and total confidence. Out in the woods, Juin walks away, probably thinking about their next move. He has no idea that he just got adopted by the most adorable little girl on the entire planet. Dorothy is suddenly filled with energy and looks around with a new sense of purpose, now that she finally feels safe. Lizzie feels a wave of relief, knowing that their protector has given the child a reason to look forward to the future. Dorothy remembers the incredible strength Juin displayed and understands that his power is the only thing keeping them alive right now. Dorothy is no longer afraid of the outside world and eagerly looks out to find the person she trusts most in this place. She claims her new father figure by calling out to him with every bit of strength she has left in her small body. To the little girl, Juin is a legendary hero who is strong enough to keep any monster or villain at bay for good. Dorothy runs out into the grass with a heart full of hope as she leaves her past fears behind her once and for all. In her heart, she knows he would never hurt her because she remembers how he holds them both tight at night. He makes sure they can sleep in peace and finally feel safe. Dorothy feels a profound sense of love and security now that she has found someone who truly cares for her well-being. Juin has provided more than just food and shelter by giving the child a brand new identity and a sense of worth. She's absolutely beaming now because having a dad who loves her this much is the best thing she could ever imagine. Juin is caught off guard by the child's affection and realizes the true importance of the role he now plays in her life. She yells for her papa with everything she has got, and the joy in her voice is unmistakable. Our boy watches as his little girl runs straight into his arms, while his whole world narrows down to her. He opens his arms wide and gets ready to catch her like he has done 1,000 times before. They share a massive hug under the twilight sky, and for a moment everything else in the world just stops existing. It is a rare moment of peace for our boy. Our boy holds her tight and looks a bit overwhelmed by how much this tiny person means to him. He picks her up and carries her through the woods like she is the most precious treasure in existence. Ho Yi finally picks the little girl up to carry her home, but he suddenly catches a whiff of a very strange scent coming from her. He checks the back of her dress and starts to realize that his daughter might have had a messy little accident in the woods. Dorothy just gives him this cheeky grin like she has no idea what he is talking about. Honestly, kids are the same in every world. Right then, the mother comes sprinting out to join them, and she looks just as relieved to see them safe and sound. It is a full-on family cuddle session now, and you can tell these three mean everything to each other. Dorothy peeks over his shoulder, and her eyes light up when she spots something interesting in the distance. She wriggles out of his arms and starts sprinting toward a wooden bucket because she knows exactly what is waiting inside. She zooms across the grass toward her prize while ignoring the bunch of thugs who are lying face down in the background. She is moving with a level of determination you only see in a kid who is about to get their favorite snack. She finally reaches the bucket and stares down at the giant slabs of raw meat with pure awe and excitement. Our little girl puts her whole soul into dragging this giant wooden bucket because she is determined to move the heavy thing on her own. She puts her entire body weight into the struggle and refuses to let the weight of the meat stop her from reaching the house. Her parents come running after her in a panic because they never expected their daughter to go on a solo mission for groceries. She is turning bright red and gritting her teeth as she refuses to give up on this mountain of meat. Ho-yi can only watch in total disbelief as the tiny girl manages to haul a mountain of raw meat across the yard using her freakish strength. The mother starts laughing at the whole situation, while our boy just stands there, processing the sheer chaos of their domestic lives. He eventually steps in to help her out, since she was about to tumble right into the bucket herself. He lifts the whole thing up, and Dorothy lets out a cheer of pure victory that echoes through the forest. Seeing her this excited over a meal makes all the trouble he went through totally worth it. Her eyes are literally sparkling as she looks at him with total admiration for being the man who provides the goods. He realizes that for a child, a bucket of meat is basically like winning the lottery. The mother claps her hands and tells them both to get inside because it is getting dark and dangerous out in the woods. They head back into their stone cabin while the woods grow quiet and the tension starts to rise again. Our boy lets out a long sigh of relief once the door is safely shut behind them. He heads back outside alone to deal with the aftermath and looks down at the intruders who are still groaning on the ground. His face turns cold, and his eyes start to glow with that terrifying energy he usually keeps hidden from his family. Suddenly, he finds himself face to face with a mysterious old man in a green cloak who has been watching from the shadows. Ho-yi is having a serious heart-to-heart with the old man in the green cloak. The old guy is laying down the law, telling our boy that he simply cannot go around beating or killing people anymore. Ho-yi takes a second to reflect on those words. He knows getting arrested or sold back into slavery would be a total disaster for the quiet life he is trying to build. The brunette woman takes a moment to reflect on her new life and feels a sense of peace knowing she is no longer alone. But a dark promise lingers in his mind. He knows if his past ever catches up to him, it is going to be a struggle that makes death look like a mercy. The old man gives him a firm pat on the chest, basically telling him to get moving. He points the way, sending Ho-yi back to the family that actually needs him. Our protagonist gathers up his gear, including a heavy wooden crate filled with blacksmithing tools. This is his new life, far away from the carnage he used to know. He finally makes it home and pauses at the door. Inside, his wife is sitting on the floor, cradling their little girl in a moment of pure, quiet peace. Honestly, seeing him this soft hits different. Ho-yi lets out a warm smile, feeling that heavy burden lift from his shoulders. He is carrying his haul for the day, finally ready to step into his role as a provider. He sets the crate down and gets to work, kneeling on the floor of their modest home. Every movement is careful, showing how much he cherishes this simple domesticity. He knows that if he loses this family he has built then, he will truly lose everything that matters to him. Losing a family once was a trauma he never wants to repeat. That kind of heartbreak is more than enough for several lifetimes. He has finally found a reason to move forward and will cherish every single second of this peaceful existence. This moment of pure joy is something he never thought possible after everything he endured in his dark past. No matter what happens or what threats come for them, he is staying right here. He waves to his wife and daughter, and they wave back, completely unaware of the monster he used to be.